Hello and welcome to this video, guys. Today we're going to redesign a complete website. We're going to add a headless CMS and we're going to develop the website within Next.JS. We're also going to add SSG, so static site generation, with incremental static regeneration so that it regenerates every 10 minutes. So this is the website we are going to transform. This website is built within WordPress and we are now going to change it into actually using Next.js with SSG and so on. Alright, so getting started. So let's get started by creating our first Sanity project. You can do this by writing npm create sanity at latest, and then you'll use the template, get started template. We're going to provide our project, the project ID, and we're going to create a data set called production, and the provider is going to be Sanity in this case. Alright, so let's type this in. I will leave the scripts within our blog post so that you easily can copy and paste them. Alright, so we have an existing project already. If you would not have any existing project, you would have to create one. So the first thing we want to do, I already have a Sanity account, but what we want to do here in this case, fetch existing project, sure, and the name we want to give it the name of the project dash CMS in this case. Alright, so now it's creating a couple of files, it installs the packages and so on. So alright, the first thing we want to do is essentially register to Sanity IO. So you would navigate Sanity IO, click on get started here, and you would register. The second thing we want to do is essentially find the script that we should use in Sanity. So we're going to execute the script here in the command to create a new project. So we do npm create sanity at latest, and we're going to say we want a template. You can use the getting started template. We are also going to say we want to create the project. As we're going to create a new project here, and when we can define the project name. So SMP Sol CMS. I'm going to name it with CMS so that we have a distinction, and then we're going to create a data set. So data set is where we will store the data in Sanity. You could have multiple data sets, one for staging, one for production, and so on. In this case, we're only going to look into production. So once you are executing this script, it will create a couple of things. So it will create an account for you. I already have an account. I already have signed in. If you hadn't signed in, it would actually ask you to sign in. And so on through the CLI. It would prompt a browser where you would have to log in with your email or whatever you choose to register with. And now once that is done, it creates the data set, it fetches the project that it created, and then now we can choose what name do we want the project to be in. So I usually go with SMP Sol-CMS for the CMS. So in order for us to get started, we're going to run first a script called install -g at Sanity CLI. So we're going to install the Sanity CLI globally on our computer. And once that is done, we can initialize the project. So we can do that by running npx sanity init. So it will initialize a Sanity project. And here it will prompt you to log in with Google, GitHub, email, and so on. So you choose what you want it to be created with. We're going to create a Sanity Studio v3 project, yes. And we're going to connect it to our existing one that we had. And we're going to use a production data set. And here we're going to say we want it to be placed within SMP Sol. What is it going to be? In this case, we're going to, let's say we're going to create through a blog schema. So it's going to give us ultimately some pre-filled data. So we're going with the blog, and obviously we're going to want to use TypeScript. So from that, now it's generating the project. Here you can choose npm yarn or manual. I'm going to choose npm in this case. I prefer npm over yarn for multiple reasons. I know yarn is much faster, but it also hides the vulnerabilities in some way that it would be detected in Node. All right, so now it's installing the project, it's adding the files, and we will jump into it shortly once that is up and running. All right, so once we have created the CMS project, so keep in mind I have a container folder which then has a couple of different folders. So one for the CMS, and now we obviously want to create the front-end one. So we would go ahead and create it with Next. So create Next app, we'll go with the latest version, and we're going to say we want to utilize TypeScript. I always prefer to work with TypeScript, it becomes much easier. So here we're not going to name it other than just SMP Sol. So we would know that this is the front end. Yes, we want to use ESLint. No, we do not want to use the source directory. No, we don't want to use any experimental thing, and here we can say what do we want the aliases to be, so we could go with SMP Sol in this case, or whatever. Sorry, it should be SMP Sol like this. Okay, SMP Sol. Let's see what happens. Import alias must follow the following. Okay, SMP Sol. Alright, so once this is done, it installs a couple of different dependencies, so React, React DOM, Next, TypeScript, and a couple of different stuff like ESLint, React DOM, and so on, and also Node. So just keep in mind that with Next.js, we'll be able to utilize React code, but we're also going to utilize features like static site generation, server-side rendering. We're also going to be able to use incremental site regeneration, which means that we'll have a static site, which we then can tell to incrementally update the file either once per hour or so. So getting started with that. Now that we have both of the projects up and running, we can go ahead and serve them. So we'll check out first the front end, and we can say npm run dev. This will just kickstart the front end Next package on localhost 3000, and we can go ahead and do the same for our CMS. So write npm run dev, and it's going to spin up that as well at localhost 3333. So once they are up and running, we can just navigate to see how it looks like and what has been created for us. So doing that, we are going to essentially, let's see here. Now they're both spun up on the different websites, so we can go ahead and say, all right, we'll go to port 3333. It's Sanity, it's going to prompt us to log in, so I'll allow it for a couple of seconds here, given that everything is set up correctly. So we can also go ahead and navigate to 3000 in this case. So here it prompts the user, where do you want to log in? I used email and password, so it's automatically going to sign me in because I have that in my keychain. So here, as you can see, we have a couple of different things already here. Because we chose the blog, we have post, author, and category things that we can insert. So if you would change the post now and want to add a new one, you would see get a title, slug, author. You can add the main image, also known as thumbnail, categories, and so on. So this is essentially Sanity. It's the Headless CMS. So it's a CMS which you then can utilize from your front-end application to create or make calls. So in this case, we're using something called Grok queries. And the Grok queries is Sanity's open source query language. So it's quite powerful, intuitive language, which is very easy to learn. It's easy to extend and make queries to simplify the way we work with the Headless CMS. So now that we have previewed how it looks like within the CMS, we can also preview how it would look like within the Next.js app. So having it like this, there's a couple of files that Vercel automatically adds to your Next application. So what we are going to do in our case, essentially, let's put the screen side by side and start actually developing. Alright, now that we have everything side by side, the first thing we essentially want to do in our project is just cleaning up the front end. So you go to your SMP Sol and you go to pages, in this case the index page here, and we're just going to clean up whatever we had from Vercel. So keep in mind that we can leave some of the stuff. We can leave the main because it might be trivial to have the main always. We can leave the favicon. We're going to change this towards our own favicon in the future, and here we can just change the title real quick. All right, so now that this is cleaned up, we can also go ahead and remove the stylings, the styles here. As you can see, it added some styles for us. We can go ahead and remove the styles from the styles folder. We can also go ahead and remove the global styles, as we do not want to have any global styles at this moment. So just clean it out. We can still have the file left here. All right, so we can also remove the fonts here, and we do not need this stuff. So now that we have come to this phase, we can start prompting stuff, and you'll see that it appears here. And we're going to discuss a bit how Next is structured. So imagine that we have a project. Within the project, you have some files. So index file would be just slash, so it would be the absolute root thing that you would have. So imagine now you want to change or add a route, which would be a contact route. You would go to pages, create a new file called contact, tsx. Here you would just export default function, just in the similar way you would do it in React. So here we can say my contact page, and whatever you have here will be prompted here. So if I would go to /contact, we should come to the contact page, As you can see here, my contact page. So it's based on dynamic routing, which means that, for instance, if we would have a blog post, we would have blog, and within the blog, we most likely want to have something called ID in this way, and the ID then would make it possible for us to actually extract this from the URL, and this will most likely be the slug and not the ID. So we can start by creating a couple of pages. So this is going to be the blog page that we're having. So going back to the index page, I'm quite lazy. Just copy everything. If you're lazy like me, this will simplify your life. So this is going to be the /blog, and the index will always appear on the root. So in this case, we're creating a page called blog. So we can go ahead and call blog page, and we can go ahead and do this. For now, we're going to substitute it with actual content soon. So now if we go to the blog page, we should appear here. So we'll go ahead and add just my blog here, something like this, and you'll see that we have my blog here. So in this way, we can in fact start working upwards. We're going to use static site generation with incremental static regeneration to regenerate the pages, because if you're changing something with static site generation, it will not change until you redeploy. So what we will do in our case is essentially make it incrementally static regenerated, which means that for every 10 minutes, if you publish something, within 10 minutes, the change will appear within the actual website. So this is something we'll do. We're also going to look into deploying the actual application. So the first thing we want to do in this case is let's create a beautiful first page. So in order for us to create a beautiful first page, what I would recommend essentially is to create to pick something to work with, material UI design or anything, because it will take a lot of time to actually do it on yourself. So my first pick in my case would be Mantine. I really like Mantine, how easy it is to actually extend the styles and build in your own components and so on. So what we're going to do is essentially we're going to utilize and create it from Mantine. So what we want to do is we want to say, next we're going to use the hooks, we're going to use core, and we want to use the form in this case because the form is absolutely amazing. So once we have these three, we can go ahead and just snatch the npm script from Mantine dev guides next, and it's going to install a couple of different things for us. So going back to VS Code in our case and just opening the new terminal here and prompting this will install all of the stuff. Just make sure that you stand within the actual front-end project. So now we'll install Mantine, we'll install Mantine Mantine hooks, Mantine form, so that we can utilize form and form validation and so on. So in order for us to get started with this, we want to do a couple of things. So in the documents page, we want to create a couple of things so that when we call the actual styles, we want them to be generated before you load the page, so it's not having any jump. So what we need to do, they have a file here, as you can see to the right, and some explanation on what you should add. But let's go back and put the projects side by side once again, just to simplify. And as you can see here, we're just going to essentially copy and paste whatever we have here. So we'll just extend the regular document that we have. It's like this, and then we'll just change it with the render instead of having the return that we have. We also want to set the lang, because this is a good attribute for SEO purposes. It's required to have it. So saving this, also it tells us to add the Mantine provider, so we're going to do that. It tells us to navigate to app.tsx. Sorry, we have friender, which is not correct. So now let's go to app.tsx, and here is where we essentially want to wrap it with. We want to wrap it with Mantine provider. We also want to add a couple of other things here. So let's go ahead and just add some fragments here so that we can start adding things. So let's go ahead and add the head from here. I think it's quite trivial. So we'll just add the default thing that will be overridden from the pages that we have. So this will be the first thing, and then we're going to add the viewport. Also keep in mind that we want to add the head from next head and not from the document. So once this is done, we have the component. So here, through the dynamic routing, whatever is being passed will be passed into the component here. All right, so now we want to wrap it with the Mantine provider, as you can see here, so that all of the components we have, we can utilize some Mantine logic and so on. So doing this, we're going to import it. We're going to remove these color schemes and so on. We can leave this for now. We're going to override it, the color schemes and so on. So going back here, as you can see, there's a couple of things. There's actually a couple of things here you can. Let's see. We're going to. So now we have some issues within the document. Saving here, we'll see what it actually is. So document is not defined. I think we forgot to add it from, let's see, from next document here. So go ahead and just add it from here. I'm not receiving any linked things because it's, yeah. So now we can start utilizing the Mantine components that we want to have. So for instance, on the index page, we can just go back to the Mantine here. We can go to core, and here we can choose whatever we want. So they have containers which we can copy and start utilizing if you would like that. They have flex, they have grids, they have a couple of different components really that we can start utilizing. But the bottom line is, let's create the first header. So usually the thing I do is I subtract the containers. So I would create a container folder here, and within the container I would just create a subfolder called home. So this is the home page, and within the home page I would add all of the components related to the home page. So in this case it would be the hero. So in this case we can call export default function hero, and here we can just return anything, and we'll start adding content to it shortly. So now we can go to the index pages and we can import the hero from here. So let's see what it does. You can see that the import is not quite, it's not super nice. So we can make a couple of things with barrel functions or essentially barrel files to make it easier. So we can just go ahead and say index.tsx, and we can just export default as hero from hero. So we will just export default as hero from hero, and this will make it possible for us to actually remove the hero from here with free shakeability. So all right, so now we can continue. We have our hero. It should be displayed on the home page. In this case, we can just go ahead and remove tabs like this so that we can have more area to look within. We're also going to make it a bit smaller because, yeah, so that we can see the code essentially. All right, so continuing with this, we have the hero. Going into the hero, we can just print my hero section. And we should shortly just appear here within the, sorry, not the blog, but rather the index page. So if we go to index page, my hero section, but as you know, all of the components that we have most likely will use a header and a footer. So we'll go ahead and create a shared component. So starting with this, we'll create a shared folder, and the shared folder will have another folder called components. And within the components, we'll create the header tsx. So here we can say export default function header, and here we can return a couple of things. So we can create a nav and so on. I'm going to show you the power of actually utilizing Mantine. So it's quite similar. If you're used to working with material UI design, it's quite similar. I still prefer default as header from header. All right, so once we do this, we can go to the app tsx, and keep in mind that the header, we want to have the header on all pages, and if we want to be able to use Mantine, we need to put it within here. Another way of doing this would essentially be to create a page, and the page would then have the header, component, and footer. I think in some cases that might be just overkill, but we'll keep it in this way for now. So we'll have a navigation. Within the navigation, we'll have a list. So the first element will be the logo type. So in this case, we'll go with SMP. The second item will be a sublist, which essentially will have all of the links. So if we go ahead and add a couple of links, so we'll have a about page. Let's not add too much details here. We'll go with about, what services the products have. We'll go with the pricing, and we also want to go with the blog that we're going to create. And at last, we want to have a CTA, so a call to action, which is going to be a button. We can just go ahead and add a Mantine button. So we'll add it for Mantine core. It's going to be a contact, so it's going just to link to the contact page. Just ignore the design for now. We're going to improve the design significantly. We're also going to make sure that we have a generic design for the whole application. So continuing with this, we are going to create some styles. So the way you can create styles with Mantine is by actually, let's say we'll do it const use styles equals to create styles, and you will import this from Mantine styles. So we'll go ahead and import this from Mantine core, sorry, and then you would go ahead and be able to put your CSS like this. So usually you have the root for the root, so the in this case we have classes.root for the nav bar, and here's what you would do. You would just extract the classes from the use styles, because if you look into the documentation of the use styles, it will return a couple of different things. So we want to be able to access the style. So now we can start writing the CSS within the actual page. So here we can say on the nav we want to have a background color, which is going to be theme primary color. We're going to change the primary color later. This looks horrible. Let's not do that for now. The way we can change the primary color would be to go to app.tsx file. So once we're in the app.tsx file, there's a couple of things we can do. So we can go ahead and add our own custom colors. We can give it a name. Let's call it brand for now. Within the brand, it will take an array, so you could be able to just select amongst a couple of colors. So the colors we want to choose in our case is essentially we're going to use a more blue grayish color for the primary one, and now we can say the primary color should be the brand in this case as a string, so it should be the key of whatever we have within the colors. So that starting with this, it should start working, but I think we need to add a couple of more things. So we need to add let's go ahead and add a secondary color, and let's add a tertiary color. So once we have added a couple of colors, we can go ahead and start using it. We'll continue by adding a couple of more colors to it. So we'll add white. We're going to add another blue color to it. We're also going to continue with some purple-ish color to match the color scheme that we have. And lastly, we're going to use a yellow-ish color to match whatever we have. So in this case, we have, as you can see, the last color we added was added to the button. We're going to change this later, so don't be hung up on it. So don't worry, we'll continue. So going to the header, we're not going to use the theme primary. In this case, we're going to say we want to use the color, and then we're going to go with brand, and then we can say the first position in this case, which is essentially what we had in the app.tsx file, which is the primary color. All right, so continuing with this, we can go ahead and just go to the globals. We're going to use the body. We're going to remove the margin. Going to set margin 0. We're going to set padding 0 on the, and then once this is done, we can go back to the header. So now we're going to add one for the UL, or so we can go ahead and call it the menu list. In this case, I think it's quite good to name them more appropriate. It becomes much easier to debug and so on. So here we can remove the margin, we can remove the padding, and as you can see here, it's put in this way. We also want to flex it, so we'll go with flex, justify content, we'll go with space between, so that we send the logo type to one side and the other logic to the right side. We want to remove list style and say we have non-list style. We also want to repeat this logic for the second menu list that we have, except for having the content in this way. But let's go ahead and copy it. We'll essentially copy this and place it for the second list as well. And as you can see here, we have some sort of a menu being aligned in this way. Obviously, it does not look good at all right now. We're going to get into that. So we can go ahead and add some links, which is going to be next links. So this will be more trivial. And here we can set the href to be /about. Usually you want to have a constant map that you will point out the routes to. We'll get into that shortly as well. So let's go ahead and just replace it, and then we'll make sure that it actually looks good. So services, and within here we have pricing, and then we have the blog, and we can leave the button for now. All right, so we have the blog. So after we have added all of this, we can also make sure that we have the correct router link. Let's go ahead and close this terminal. We don't need it for now until we have some errors we need to look into. So saving this, you can see it looks quite horrible, but you can also make sure that navigating to the blog page works. And now we want to add a link as well for the home page so that we can get back to our home page really. So, and we're just going to go with an empty or front slash. This will make it possible for us to navigate to the root. We don't have any services page, so that's going to cause an error. And let's make sure that it actually looks good now. So we want to say all of the links within here, we want to have a color white. Okay. And we want to have text decoration, none. And now you might think, wait, are we going to have to remove it from all of the links that we have? You're absolutely correct. We could just go to the here and say text decoration none, and we do not need to set the color here, but we can say on hover, we want you to it's CSS, so on hover we want you to have a text decoration underline. So when you hover the links, we want you to have. So here is where you can put your global CSS. So we can remove it from here. The decoration, we can just define the color here. The colors will always be quite difficult from place to place. And as you can see here, we have something. It does not look good. We can also say we want to align the items centered so that, yeah, they're centered towards each other in this way. We can also go ahead and say we want to have more paddings on the links that we have. So we'll go ahead and say display block to give them the space, and we're also going to say padding 12 in this case. We're going to give it a padding so that the menu looks much better than before. We can also actually say we want to have a padding of 16px. So as you can see here, we have a menu now. So the thing we need to do now in order for us to actually continue with this is we most likely want to have a container. So we do not want the things to be wrapped all of the way to the sides, because this will look quite bad. So what we can do is we can say we want to add a container for Mantine, and then we can just wrap our content with that real quick, and you'll see what happens. So as you can see, it's still floating all of the way, and here we have some logic where it's actually stuck. So it's like default settings, which we could override if we wanted to. At this point, we do not want to do it. We're going to change all of that in a later phase. So once this is done, there's another thing we want to start by doing. We are going to essentially create a couple of things. So we want to have the hero bar that we have. So now we have the menu, and we're just going to jump into the hero bar. We're going to revisit the menu because we need to make it responsive. We also need to make it look a bit better than what it does look like now. All right, so we are going to jump into the hero that we created. So my hero section, it's the same concept here. We can go back and just snatch all of these use styles. If we are lazy, we can reset all of the CSS as we do not need it. We can just import it from Mantine core in this case. And at this phase, we don't have any props. In the future, there will come some props because we're going to utilize the CMS, and we're going to try to enter the logic from the CMS. So we'll just go ahead and add it for now. We don't need to have any properties for now, but this will just simplify for us in a future development. So now here is our hero section. So let's go ahead and create something called section. So just an HTML, and here we'll have the hero text, and we're going to go we can check what turns your ideas into reality. All right, so we're going to move this text into the CMS later, and here we have the H1, and here we can have the actual H2 if you would like to have it in this ways. So continuing with this, I would recommend to use Mantine as well. I know it does not look good initially, but in this way you can in fact create a standardized size for your whole application and change it in one place later. So you would go with text, and you would select the component to be the H1 tag, and you can do the exact same thing for the H2 tag. So as I mentioned, we are going to be able to override all of these different styles, so we can define something we want to be generalized amongst the whole application. And as you can see here, it does not really look good. It's fine. We're going to work with it. We also want to have some section padding, but let's go ahead and create our first reusable component. So in this case, a component that we'll be using in multiple places. So we'll go create a section component. So we go export default function section, and here we can say we want to take the children. This means we need to have a interface section props. It might be good to actually name it in a correct way. So section props, children, it's going to be a React node, or we can also say, sorry, it can also be a string just to simplify our lives a lot. All right, so once this is done, we're going to be able to pass in it here, and once this is done, we can just return. We're going to have obviously the section that we had before, and we're going to just to spread the children this way. And here we can also go ahead and add some styles. So we'll go ahead and do, let's be lazy, we'll go here and just copy the use styles that we have, really, and then we will import the use styles from there, and then we're going to just start utilizing it here. We're going to say const classes, and obviously we need to have the exactly like this. I'm using Google Copilot, which is quite nice sometimes it doesn't do shit, but let's go ahead and do a couple of things. So we're going to pass in the children. We also want to be able to pass in some class name, which is going to be optional in this case. So we'll just go with the question mark, and here we need to go with the string, obviously. And we can go ahead and add it to the props here as well. So class name, just as a default, will default an empty string, and we should be able now to add it here. So in order for us to add both internal styles and styles that we have coming from other place, we need to do it in this way. So classes, and here we can go with root, but we also want to be able to print the class name that we're sending in. All right, so now when we're started with this, we're going to say every section that we have, or every section that we want to have, is going to have a certain padding. It's going to have, let's say it's going to have a 140 pixel and 0. We could go with 120 pixel up and down, and we can now go ahead and import a section from the actual hero section we're at. Instead of using our own section, we can, but the thing we want to do is we want to export it here in a similar way we did with the header, so that we can have a nice import. So shared component in this case. So once we add it, it will automatically add some padding on top and the bottom. Maybe we want to even change it to margins, but let's continue working with this. So we're here, we want to be able to add some colors so that it looks nice. So we're going to we're going with root here, and we are going to be able to const classes equals to the styles. All right, so now we can go ahead and say we want a background color of the hero to be the background color we had of so theme, colors, brand, and then 0, so that it matches the menu. So now we have something like this. We can also say we want the color to be white. All right, so now we have something that looks better than it did before. We're not quite done really, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add some padding. So essentially we can not add the 120 pixels, but rather we can add some spacing to the corners. But this is not something we want to do within each and every component that we have, so we can go ahead and say every section that we add are going to have this padding that we were essentially having here, so that we have a similar way of actually jumping in the content. All right, let's look into actually styling the H1s that we have. I just opened the page here so that we can mimic and look how it looks like within a Mantine. So if we would go to app.tsx, we would have, according to the documentation, we should be able to add a section here called headings, and within the headings we should be able to specify the font family and so on. We can go with enter 600 in this case. Maybe we'll go with 400. 600 is quite good. We'll go with sizes, and for the sizes here we can say on H1 we want to have a font weight which is 800 maybe, and we want to have a font size which is 3 rem, and we want to have a, this needs to be stringified, line height, let's go with 1.4 in this case. And in this way we can in fact generalize the way it looks like. So this should be appearing here shortly if I haven't missed something. Let's see, sizes, H1 headings, this should be working. All right, as per the new documentation of Mantine, they have not they have stopped using text for this, so we can just change this to title instead. And instead of having component, they're using something called order, so we just change order in this case, and we remove the 1 and 2, and it needs to be a number as well. So this now is going to define an h1 and h2, and as you can see, the h1 is now receiving the style that we have. Going to the app.txs file, we can do the exact same thing for the h2. So let's go ahead and say this is going to be 2.5 rem. Maybe it's maybe too big, and we can go ahead and do that for h3 and h4 as well, so that we have it. So we're going to decrease the font weight 1 by 1 here, and here we're going to have essentially, let's say we decrease it by 0.6, so this would be 0.8 and this one 0.2, and this should also be reduced by in this way. So what we can do now is essentially we can go ahead and let's decrease this one as well. I think it looks too much, and here we can have it in this way. So now we can say that we don't want to have an h2 here anymore, we want it to be changed. So we can go to the hero, we say we want it to be an h4 instead, maybe because it looks a bit less. Also, we have built-in support in Mantine to write empty, and then this will determine the margin top in this case, and we can say margin top is going to be 16 in this case. Same thing here, we can say margin top is going to be 0 if you would like to have it in this way. It's quite similar if you have been working with Bootstrap before. They had this similar system with the class name, but alright, so now we have the text here, and we have the actual content. So now we can go ahead and add the CTA, the call to action button. So we'll go ahead and add button. In this case, we can just this is going to be the field one, and the reason to why we want to have the field one is because we want this to be our call to action. So contact us, and we can in the similar way say margin top is going to be 12 here, and keep in mind we're going to change these colors as well, so don't you worry about the colors that we have now. Actually, we're going to go with 24. We're also going to say size is going to be XL, we want it to be a bit more, and we're going to say border radius is going to be let's say XL in this case. Alright, so now we have some kind of logic. Obviously the white does not go with this this color here, so we're going to change the yellow from the buttons to another color to make it more matchy. It's going to be yeah, it's going to be orange instead. I think that would be a better variant of a color for it. Alright, so now that we have the hero section, we'll just keep on adding the items to the DOM here, and we will start designing and making sure that it looks much better with time. So usually websites, you would have the hero section, and the hero section in this case would essentially be placed in this way. This is the hero section. Within the hero section, it's quite normal that you have your USPs, so explaining a bit what services you offer and so on, and this is something we're going to add now. So what we want to do in this case, let's shrink this a bit more and put it to the side once again. What we want to do is now go to the hero section, copy the code here. I'm quite lazy, so I copy a lot. So hero, and now we're going to say the services TSX, and here we are essentially just clean out the code. Here we can just change home to services. It's going to have a section in a similar way, and here we're going to have our USPs. All right, so saving this, let's go ahead and create a couple of USPs. So each one of the items is going to be an article, and for every article that we have, we're going to have a kind of a logic. So we're also going to add a different color here. We want to have a background color, which is going to be a specific color. There's a couple of ways to utilize this. If you do not like the Mantine way, which I really don't like, I would just go ahead and create within the shared folder. You would create something called styles, and here you would have like index.tsx, and within the index.tsx you can place the constant. So export const, we can call it colors, and here we can say accent color, which is going to be this orange color, and then you can go ahead and say primary, which is going to be the blue color that we have in the menu here. We're not going to utilize the yellow version in this way because it, as you can see, it does not look too good. So copying this, we can essentially utilize the colors here. We can save this. If I go back here now, I can say, hey, I want the background of this section to be colors, so I can import it from shared styles, and it's going to be the accent color. So if we just scroll down a bit, we'll see what happened. There's no color being applied as of yet. We can just, yeah, of course not. We have forgotten to add it into the index page. So we can go ahead and add it to the index page, and the reason to why we are having barrel functions, barrel files rule is because we do not want to import these from two different places. It becomes cluttered, so we're going to go ahead and essentially add the services as well. So what we can do now is we can go to the barrel file here, and we can just go ahead and replace the hero with services, and now we're good to go. So if you go back to the index page, the first page that we have, you'll see now we have a color here, the orange color that we added. I zoom out so that we can see the contrast here. It looks quite good, it's quite smooth. They work good with each other in this case. So now we're going to continue working on this, and we are going to add our services that we provide. All right, so let's jump into the services box. Here we are essentially want to have some kind of logic. It all depends on how you would want it to be displayed. So maybe here we could have an h2 tag at first. So how our agency can help, and here we will have provide some information. Also keep in mind that we will want to use the titles that we have, so that we have a set of standardized way of actually printing it. I think this is maybe we should go with an h2, but maybe we should set a max width as well. But we'll continue with the CSS and make sure that it looks good in shortly. So we're going to wrap this stuff with a div, because we want to apply some classes. So we'll just class name, classes. This is going to be the USP wrapper is usually what I call them, and wrapper with an R as well. So here we want to have a display flex. I do not like grids. Justify content space between align item center. We do not want to have them align in center, but we rather want to have them we want to have a gap on 32 pixels. So we want to have the gap here that we're setting, and now saving this, we should have a sort of a gap with the items that we currently don't have. So we're going to go ahead and add a couple of things here. So we're going to add 3 boxes, and within each box we can also give it a class name so that we can style it a bit. Usually here is you want to focus on the content, so don't make a too large contrast here. Now people that's really good with UX design is probably going to kill me with this, but let's continue with it. We'll call it article in this way, in this case, and starting with it, we're going to give it a border. So we'll have a border of, let's call it 1px, and we're going to have sorry, I think I have the wrong accent color. I just noticed. So let's go to the styles index page. Here we can say this is going to be the accent. You can call it accent background in this case. Sorry, it's going to be the reversed, of course. So the accent background is going to be a bit lighter, as you can see, because it will be much easier towards your eyes as a this is just going to be accent, and this one at the top is going to be accent background. Yeah, so continuing with this, we can add the boxes here, we can add some logic. So we'll go ahead and create, within the boxes we'll have an h3 tag. Obviously, as I mentioned before, let's try to give them in this way so that we can standardize the sizes. So design, we'll go with the design, development, and the last thing we want to offer our customers is, let's say, courses, education. I know that this website had a couple of different UI, mobile development, education, and so on. So we'll just keep with that. So what we want to do now is want to set all of the articles, we want them to have a width of yeah, this is going to be 1/3 because we want them to be. So in this case, we can go ahead and use the calc method, or so 100% divided by 3, and we can remove the gap now. I guess it's quite redundant, and we will also want to say on the nth child. So on the second item, in this case, we're only going to have 3 items that we offer. So border left, none, and we're also going to say on the border right none, because as you can see now we have double lines here, which is not quite good. It's not looking too good, and this is obviously something we'd have to remove within mobile devices because we want to align them in one way. So zooming out, we have our actual content here, as you can see, and yeah, the sections that we have don't really have the container sizes, as you can see, and the reason to that is because we want to be able to apply a certain color to it without actually breaking everything. So we can go ahead and add a container to the content, because the content is where we want to have it. So adding it to the content in this way, you'll see now it has the sizes. We can also go ahead and go to the hero section to do the same thing. We can go ahead and add it there. We're going to close it there. So importing it from Mantine core will make it, as you can see, it will wrap it within the same line here. All right, so continuing with this, doesn't really look good. So what we're going to do for each one of the boxes, we're going to add a specific padding. So we're going to go with a bit bigger padding on desktop devices, and then we're going to shrink it towards mobile devices. So we're going to go with 40 pixels. We can add a couple of rounded borders as well. We can go with 6px. Let's go ahead and call this export const styles. And here we're going to add some default thing that we want to have. You can also do it in Mantine. I really like to do it myself so that I have full control of what's going on, especially when you are styling it in this way. So we don't want to have the borders for everything. So in this case, for the first child, we want to have the border, border. So it's going to be, so it's going to be, this is top, and then we have right, and so on. Let's import it from styles. Let's go with 6px, and you will see what happens. Border 6px, border radius, sorry, should be border radius obviously, and this should also be renamed to border radius to make more sense. So once we have this, you'll see that it looks quite strange because we don't need it at all places. So this is most likely what we want to have, because we want to have it on the top left and bottom left, as you can see here. We also want to have it on the last child to appearing in a reversed manner, really. So we're going to change the zeros with whatever we had here. So reversing the logic here in this case, saving. Now we should have a group boxes like this. I still think that the border looks it's too much. So what we're going to go ahead and do, and we're going to add a color, so we're going to call it a border color. We're going to give it the default border, let's call it border accent color instead, or accent border color to follow the name that we had before. So the border is going to have an accent color, and as you can see, it's there, but it's not there, if you understand what I mean. So to continue with this, we want to add some margin bottom here. So MB, let's go with 40, and this is something we probably want to have from styles, because we probably want to shrink the margin on mobile devices. But let's go ahead and continue with this. We have the design here. I still think that it's too large. The text is way too large for us. So let's shrink it a bit. It does not really look good at all. So maybe we need to revisit the app.tsx to see what we have set for it. So maybe the H4 should be a bit bigger. Also, it should maybe be sticking to 600 in a font weight, or even 700 in this case. I think this looks quite good. Also, we're going to give it a color here. So we want to say the H4 is going to receive a specific color, which is going to be, and this is where we're coming, and the color is going to be, let's see, let's call it Let's go to the styles. We're going to add a new color. So here we're going to call it, this is going to be the brown color. So we'll go with brown. I think this is an awesome color that appears on this kind of backgrounds. So we can go ahead and say colors and import it. We're going to say colors.brown, and maybe it does not support color. All right, so we cannot set colors in this way. We need to define it in a way that we're doing up here. So we can just go ahead and add it to the here. So yeah, tap there. Let's go ahead and add brown. Yeah, as you can see, moving it around, it selects different colors because it is a pre-selected value that actually selects. So if you would just change it a bit like this, now we would have the orange color out there. I think this is, I mean, to have the array syntax in this way, it's quite difficult to actually work with, in my opinion. But let's continue, and as you can see here, it does not look good at all because it will just revert to a yellow when you hover on it. But anyway, we have the brown color now. We can self-assign it to the title. We can give the title, as I mentioned, a clause. So we'll go with classes title, and then we'll go ahead and add the title like this, and we'll say color, and the color is going to be the brown color that we have added. So once we save this, you can see that the color is looking quite nice here. We want to have the same thing for the other one. So the article titles, either you could say want to be applying it to the h-force in this way, or you could just add the clause for it. Sometimes I think to add too much clauses will just be, yeah, horrific. All right, so continuing with this, we have added the services. It might be good to add a couple of texts, so you can go to the website to snatch some text from the boxes that they have. Obviously, this is too much. Let's go ahead and just copy anything. This will be replaced. It does not really matter what we have now. We're going to change it anyway. So we can just go ahead and add a couple of things. So we'll just, yeah. Sometimes it does not find it from Mantine course. You would have to import it yourself. Also keep in mind that for each one of these services, you probably want to have a CTA, so a call to action, which, yeah, the user we want the user to be able to react on a couple of things. All right, so once we have the text, as you can see, it's too much text. I think 2 liners here would be good enough, just selling text. We can remove a couple of things. I think this is okay-ish. Let's keep it for now. We are going to continue. So we are also going to add a margin to the title. So empty, let's go ahead and say 20 to add some space there. And then at the bottom of it, we want to add a button. So this is going to be a variant. I usually call them subtle. It's going to be something that's there, but yeah, let's see how this looks like. We do not want it to jump in this way. I think this looks quite weird, so we're instead going to go with a link here, which we're going to style. So adding the link, we can now go ahead and just remove the button real quick. We can say href, and here we're going to have the services, and then maybe the slug to be placed here. So obviously the link won't work now. This is something we'll have to replace when we are actually implementing the actual content. So continuing, let's add a margin top. So we cannot add in so here we'll go with margin bottom instead. We'll go with 20. Actually, let's go with a bit more so that we can distinguish it from the content. All right, so now we have it. It does not look good. We also want to give this a bit more approach of what we have. So we're going to try to go with, let's add a clause. So we can go ahead and add a clause name. Classes CTA. I usually call them CTA, or it simplifies a bit. So here we want to have the color. It's going to be color is brown. And yeah, so once we have added the, all right, what's the issue here? The CTA does not, added it on the wrong level. So once we add it here, it will appear. We can also say that globally, you usually want to have the links to be a bit wider. So we want them to be bold as default. Because it makes more sense when they come in text and you have it in this way. So continuing with this, we go to services. We also want the the text in this case, we can say that the text is going to be the component P. This is most likely going to be changed to a div because we want to be able to fetch the content from, say, a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, so where you can enter HTML, whatever you want to be inserted. All right, so continuing with this, we have the P. I think it still does not look good, so we can essentially add a class here as well. We can say class, our really class name. So really we don't need to do that because we can do the same here as we did with the h4. So we'll go ahead and add a P tag, and here we can say font weight, and here we're going to decrease it significantly. So to 300, so that it will look something like this. And then we can do the same thing for the development. We can just go ahead and say, we copy these 2 lines here. For development, this is something we obviously are going to change, so we do not need to be too strict about this. We can go ahead and just copy this into the 2 other boxes that we have. So once we have added to the boxes, we can just go ahead and just insert the dummy data here, as I would say. And we can just copy the same thing here. So this was education. We can just copy it from education instead, and go ahead with that. So after we have this, we should have some CTA boxes, and I mentioned this is too long, so we'll just shorten it a bit so that it looks a bit better. Obviously we want to have a maximum of 2 or 3 lines to make it more easy for us to read, and probably we want to have, yeah, as you can see here, we want to have it more responsive in the future. As for now, we just want to keep it in this way. All right, so keep in mind that whenever you present information, you most likely want to have a CTA, a call to action, where the user can learn more and so on. And to put learn more here is, you know, it's going to complain a bit about the SEO thing, like learn more about what, nothing's being really specified. So you could do learn more about the sign, and here you could, yeah, you could just change the text so that there are essentially explaining a bit what you do and so on, so that it won't complain. So we have blue, we have the light section, and after we have the light section, obviously we want to have a blue section again. And most likely on the first page, we want to be able to present our work. What have we done? So we're going to create something called work TSX. We're going to just export it from here. I know it will get some errors because we haven't really created the component. Let's go ahead to hero, just copy whatever we had here and enter it here, so we can go ahead and just rename it to work. And we want to have the container, we want to have the section, we want to have this, but we do not want to have anything else. All right, so this is something I would want to get rid of, so I would just go ahead and import our primary color, because I think it's, yeah, it's too much magic numbers for my taste. There are probably better ways of doing it, but I prefer to have it in this way. So when you're on work, we can go ahead and go to the index page and go ahead and add work here as well. So we're going to import it from here. And this is why we have barrel files, because we want to import all of the containers from home, from the home one. You could also go an extra level so that you would import everything from containers. I think that's overkill. Don't do that because it might be trivial to have them in this way. All right, so continuing with this, there's a couple of things we can do. We can jump into the work here. Now we have the container here. So as you can see, we have the blue section already. So as you know, blue and orange goes quite well together, but white goes really well with it as well. So now the thing we want to do is we want to create, let's create a group. A group in Mantine is where you can place it. You can also say position, center. And here you can say, I want the title. So this is going to be of order 1, latest work. Does this make sense to have 2 H1s? Probably not, but I want it to be bigger than it is. So we can say size is going to be, so setting size there did actually break it. So we're not going to do that for now. I think this might be trivial anyway. We'll go to the app TSX. I think we still need to decrease the font size of the H1 and H2 so that we are distinguishing them a bit. And here we can go ahead and say, all right, so for the title, we'll go ahead and add the class called title. So the title is going to have the color white. You could go ahead and add it into the, if you do not want to have it hard coded, maybe your white color will be another white color in the future. As for now, mine is going to be totally white because you can see it looks quite good on the blue screen. So we can also go ahead and say we want to have a super small text here. It's going to be a size extra small, and we are going to import the text from Mantine in this way. And here we want to add, let's say, portfolio add text, and we can go ahead and just add a BR, sorry, the group display. You can have a block and they will appear on two different rows. We can go with inline block, maybe it would be much better. All right, so I think continuing with this, we have the portfolio. XS is quite small. I think maybe we want to have it to be small so that it's actually readable, but still not readable. If you know what I mean, it's there, but not there. So continuing, we're going to with subtitle in this case, and usually place them in the order they come in the DOM. So we'll go and add the color. This is going to be the orange color, so it would be accent in this case. Let's see what happens. So it's looking quite nice actually. So let's make it text transform uppercase. So we'll uppercase that, and we also want to say letter spacing 1.9. Let's go with 2.5 instead, so that it's a bit wider. All right, so now we have something in this way. I still wanted to center this on the main screen. Obviously some issues occurred. I think we need to remove it from the group because we're not really want to group them. We just rather want to place them in the center. I'm wondering if it's just easier to just add a class to the container here. Sorry, saying class as container, and then essentially just saying container. Yeah, aligning that to the center. But I also think that let's call it header instead. We do not want to center everything there, so yet again it might not make sense. So we'll go ahead and add a, within the container we'll add something called the header, and within the header we'll add the header class here, and we are going to do this. And here we can say the header, we want it to be display block, but we also want it to be text align center. Alright, so now we have it centered in this way. We can add some spacing to it anyway. I think maybe 20 pixels to follow the previous things that we have would be quite trivial. Alright, so continuing, we have already a couple of boxes, and if you just make the screen a bit more larger, as we can see it, it does not look too bad, but it does not look very good either. So we're just going to continue adding the HTML, and then we will make sure that we finalize and make that design pixel perfect. All right, so continuing, we are going to add back like this so that we have multi-screens. Then we are going to, yeah, we're going to continue. So continuing with this, we are going to add a couple of more things. So the things we want to add is essentially our work, so the work that we have done, and here we could add articles in a similar way that we did with the USPs. We can add article here, we can have it a bit more trivial. So just for your information guys, I'm looking at a Figma template to work from so that it's being a bit easier for us to actually create something. I would say that my profession is maybe not within UI design, but I've been working a lot with UX design and so on, so I know what looks good and what does not. So continuing, we're going to add article. So within the article, we're going to have 4 different articles in this case. Let's see what the case studies. So they have a couple of case studies here. So we're going to just mimic a couple of case studies so that we can continue with it. So the first is going to be, we're going to use an image here, so we're going to go with image source, and this is where we would need to have the copy the image, and I think we have a couple of images that we can copy from this page immediately. They don't look good, so we'll have to work with that as well. So let's see what this happens, obviously. So let's go ahead and snatch some images from Pixabay. It's an awesome website for having free pictures. So let's go ahead and say work. Maybe yeah, I don't have anything. Let's go with the sign instead. So we'll go with the sign, and here we can just copy whatever you feel, the mandalas or whatever this is. It doesn't really matter. We're going to change this anyway, and we're going to make them look beautiful anyway. So saving this, we'll go back and keep in mind, yeah, it looks super big, but it also did work with the colors. I think it was quite nice. But continuing, we're just going to add a couple of things. Also keep in mind, Sanity uses CDN, so that they will be able to scale the images quite nice. And I would say from here to top, let's add a margin of 60. So yeah, and now we can just add the work that we have. We're going to iterate over it 3 times. Let's just make an ugly thing, which is array. We're going to create an instance of array. Yeah, we can do it like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to just use 4 work on the front page, and we're just going to iterate through it. Just so that we have something we can replace. And here we're going to go with the index, and then we're going to give it a key, in this case just for now. So iterating through it 4 times, and obviously we need to add a couple of CSS for this, so we'll go then and add article for the CSS. So adding article here, we can go ahead and say article. We're going to say max width, but we're also going to say that the images, my friend, you cannot be greater than 100% of your parent. So in general, this should work. Okay, max width with a capital W. So now you can see here that we have it in this way. So as you can see, they're being aligned on a 1 row each, which is because we essentially don't have wrapped it with a container, which is essentially having the flex. So we'll go with article wrapper in this case and go ahead and add the flex to it. So we'll go ahead and say display flex. Also try to place them in the way they appear in the DOM. It becomes just easy, a lot easier. So justify content, space between. We want to have a gap of what, maybe let's say 30 pixels. So we're having gap of 30 pixels, and we want to have flex wrap, and we want to make them wrap, because we want to have 2 of them really. And so what we want to do now is we want to have, let's say, the first item we want to have, so we can go with nth child. Let's go with even, and we want the evens one to have a certain width, meanwhile the other ones to have, and you can see 1 of each. So actually we want to say that if you are not, we want you to have we want you to be 2/3 essentially. So in order for us to do that, we need to say this. But I think maybe we'll have one which is going to be 60% and the second one is going to be 40%, just to simplify our lives like a lot. So we'll add the calc here because we need to recalc a couple of things due to the gap that we have. So the first one is going to be 60% and the second one is going to be 40%. And as you can see here, we need to subtract 15px there, and we want to subtract 15px from the other element in this case, so that we have the grid that we want to have. We want to say that we want the height to be 100%. This does not look good with these images, but obviously we need to do a couple of different things when we align them. Also keep in mind that we want to have it the reversed way, so the first one should have it like this, second one this, and so on. So in order for us to do this, we want to say, all right, for the odd, we want to have it like this, but the second time it comes, we want it to be reverted. So we want this one to be a bit larger. So what we can do is we can specify the nth child. So the first child that we have, we want it to be large, small, and then we can go with the same thing for the third. So doing this, it should be the fourth in this case. All right, so now we have the pattern that we wanted to achieve. So we have a quite nice pattern with some padding and so on, and this is going to be replaced with work that we have actually done. So what we want to do, and what we usually do, is because these images are too visible, you could add an overlay of it. So we're going to essentially say we want to add an overlay, so we'll go ahead and say background. Sorry, we're going to use the pseudo elements instead. Here we're going to say before, and here you need to add content, and you also need to say display block, position absolute, and then we want to set position relative. And once this is done, we can continue. So it's absolute and the other one is relative. So now we can say we want to add a background color, which is going to be the colors brown in this case, and we're going to say z index 1 in this case. Also, we're going to say that we want to have a top 0, left 0. We also want it to be width 100%. So now we're essentially just trying to wrap it all over the image that we have here. So as you can see here, we have a couple of things now. Also keep in mind for the images, we want to have a border radius, which is going to be the styles that we added dot border radius. So we can just import that real quick, and we can do the same here. And now what we want to do is we want to have a certain opacity. So let's say opacity 0.32. So it's there, but it's not there. Maybe even less. We want to have it 16. We want to have a, let's say, mix blend mode. We want to have normal mix blend mode. We can also say that we want to have exclusion, or we could also say we want to multiply, and you can see that a couple of different things happen. So we want to have it multiply, we want it to be there but still not there. Continuing with this, there's a couple of things we still need to do. Maybe we should in fact remove it and just place it on the image instead. And the reason to that might be because so we can add a image wrapper shortly, but it's because we want to have buttons within these images which are quite visible and does not have to do anything with opacity and so on. Alright, so to continue, we're going to create and add buttons, so call to actions. So as I mentioned, we want to have call to actions on pretty much everything that we have, because this is, we want to lead the customers to us, we want to lead the customers to contact us to start to buy our services. Alright, so scrolling down, we have the latest work that we have. We're going to add a couple of buttons within the article. So for the article here, we can go ahead and say button. Sorry, we want it to be a Mantine button. We're going to change the look of these buttons later. And this is going to have the color white. And let's see, we're going to change these stylings later, I think. And this is going to be essentially what work you work with. So this is going to be the name of work. Sorry, it's not going to be name of work. We're going to have an H2 really here that is going to be the name of the work. Sorry, it's just going to be number 2. So when we get back here, we should have, you can see the text is appearing in this way. We also want this section to be put in a position absolute, so we could go ahead and say group. Let's see here, position absolute. Let's see if this works with the Mantine. I think not. So let's go ahead and just create our own classes for this. Class name, classes, let's call it CTA, article CTA, or article content maybe, but let's go ahead with the article CTA. If you feel for changing, we can always do that. So we're going to say position absolute. We're going with top 0, or essentially we're going with bottom 32 instead. Let's go bottom 0. We have the button there, that's why it looks quite in this way. We're going to mix it so that the we're going to put this so that we have the button on top, and here we're going to give it the color white of the button. But what we want to do, the CTA, we want to have a padding of, I think 40 pixels is quite good, because that's what we had on the previous section that we had on the top here. So 40 pixels will continue to utilize the same logic here. And here we can say we want a color to be colors white. Right, so as you can see here, this is what I mentioned with the text. We want the text to appear on top of the opacity item and not below the opacity item. So what we can just go ahead and add class name image wrapper, and we can, if we feel for adding a variable for this in the future, we can always do that, but let's go ahead and do this. We can just snatch all of this before tags like this, and we can still have the position relative there. Let's see what happens now. As you can see, it's a couple of changes has been made. We can see, is it really this logic that breaks it? As you can see, the height of the images is no longer 100%, and this is something that we can fix in a later phase. As I mentioned, it's not going to be super important right now, so here we can say we want to set index to be greater of what you had before, and here we can just decrease the amount of the, so that the text here is more readable than it previously was. So now we're also going to say that the CTA article CTA section, and then we're going to have the button, which is essentially the article CTA. So article CTA, we're also going to say that we want you to be a size of XS. We want it to be quite small. We want it to be having a radius which is going to be XL. We want to have a bit of rounded corners. So now we can go ahead and just add the color here. So we can say we want you to have a background color, which is going to be the colors.white, and we are going to add the text here, which is going to be, for instance, this is going to be development, so that maybe the filter. So once, if it's white, we obviously need to add a color here, which is going to be the color of it. So in this case, we're going with brown, and maybe we want to have some spacing, at least maybe 20 pixels here, so empty 20, so that we have some logic between them. Alright, so now what we want to do is essentially make sure that the image is 100%, and what we need to do in order to get that is essentially set height 100% on the image wrapper. So now that we have them in this way, we can also zoom out to see how it would look like. In desktop, it's starting to look much better than it did before. So let's just continue. So hovering on this button here is becoming yellow, which is kind of not what we want. So we are essentially going to say that when you hover on the CTA, which is the button in this case, we are going to say, we can maybe revert these colors. So we can say the button should be brown and the text should be white. You can see what that would result in. It doesn't look too good, to be honest. So let's go ahead and skip that. We want to keep, since we're using Mantine, we need to override the default background and color, but we can also add a opacity. So in order for us to simulate that we are hovering over it, we can add an opacity on 70% in this case. So hovering on the button, it will make it like this, and we can add a transition easily by writing transition. We can set ease in, and usually I also add the transitions into my style. So transition, so that we have a generic transition for all places, like this. So you can say colors.transition, and it would let's see, sorry, not styles.transition, and now whenever we hover, it will have some sort of an animation effect. So the thing is, it's not only when we hover on the button we want it to be present, so that's why we're going to remove it. So we essentially want to have the hover effect whenever we hover on the whole article. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and add the hover effect here. We're going to say when you hover, we want you to do the animation, and we also want the opacity of 70%. And we also want to have the cursor pointer. It's going to be a link. It's not linked now, but it's going to be, the whole article is going to be linked. And as you can see here, hovering it will give us the perception that it's clickable, which is kind of nice. Maybe it's too little. Maybe we want to have 0.6 to make it even more practical. So as you can see here, we have it's starting to look quite good. Okay, so Now that this section is done, we also want to add a button which will take us to all of these work that we have done. So explore more. In this case, we can add a button in the bottom here. We can say button. It's going to be a Mantine button. Explore more. We can also say that this is going to be a link. And importing it as a link, we can take us to the href, which we're going to start adding links to. So what I usually do is we go ahead here and in the shared we'll add constants. In the constants folder we call it URL constants tsx. So essentially we want to just say export const URLs, and here we want to say home, contact, about, services, work, blog, and so on, so that we can change them in an easy way afterwards. So we also want to add a barrel file here. So we want to just say export start from URL constants, and now we can start utilizing it. So we'd go ahead and say, when we press the button, we want you to take us to work, in this case, so all of our work. And I think one thing that might be worth to look into is that the link will have a tab index, and so will the button house, so you need to disable one of them. So by setting it to -1, you will disable it so that we can click on the button, in this case, only to receive one tab index. All right, to continue, we're going to center it. Let's do it by adding a group. In the group, we're going to say position, and we can call the position to be set as center, and we can just wrap it. But we also want to have a margin top of, say, in this case, we want to have it on, that's too much with 80, so we want to go around 60, I would say, to fill the other. So this one is also going to have a different variant. We cannot have too many primary CTAs, so this one is going to be outline. So it's going to be inverted in this case, and we're going to change, as I mentioned before, we're going to change the colors and the way these buttons work in a later phase. So all of these buttons are going to be changed so that we have something that's reusable amongst all application. So now that we have the work section, we can go back to the index page once again. And as you can see here, we have hero, we have services, we have work. What more do we need to have? Let's check what that website had to see what we offer. So the services, and then the case studies. Also, they had the news, so we should have a news section, and then they had a partner section. So what we can do now, in this case, we can go ahead and add a news section. So we'll go ahead and call it news. And this is in a similar way. We'll just go to work, we'll copy the logic here, and we'll create something called news.tsx. We're also going to make sure that we export it from the variable file. So we'll do it like this. So saving, let's go back to the news page. And here we can just essentially just rename the work to news. Let's see here. So doing this, we should have a quite similar section to the one that we see here, but we also need to save here and import it from the container. And if you go to the news, something is essentially wrong here, most likely because news does not exist. So we will send it to blog in this case, so the blog post that we will have. So as I mentioned, it's duplicated now because we essentially just copied and pasted the content, so we're going to have to change that. Either we can go with more blue and have an inverted screen and layout here, which is quite nice, or we could continue with having the lighter orange in this way. So I think for these sections we're going to put an inverted color here, and we are going to place all of the news that we have. Let's see, we are going to, instead of having portfolio news in this way, we'll have the inverted section. We'll not have the full screen in this way. So the container will receive a specific color. So the root can still have the blue color that it has today, but the container is going to receive a new color, which is going to be, it's going to be the background. It's going to be colors dot it's going to be colors dot, let's see what the name was, accent background in this case. So we'll go ahead and add the accent background. And if you just zoom out a bit to see what it looks like, you will be able to see that it will in fact look a bit better, not with the content in this way, but rather to have a content laying like this. So what we'll do is we'll jump back into the shared screens like this, and we'll continue to work on this design. So what we're going to do now is essentially we want to remove these boxes. We do not want to have, or we can still have the let's see, the article CTA. We can remove the image wrapper. We are going to want to have let's see here, the hover effect on the articles to be remaining. So now also I took away this max width 100%. So let's go ahead and add that back. We don't need any border radius or height set to it. So we're going to have a blog, and we want to have it wrapped so that we have, let's see, so that we have 3 on each line on desktop devices. So we'll go with calc 100% divided by 3. And of course we have a gap, which is essentially what removes that, so we need to remove it. So in order to proceed with that, we'll add -20 here so that it will eat up the space, and you'll see that we have a grid for all of these items. And we're also going to say we only want to have 3 items presented for the news. I think that's more than enough. And we'll have explore more news. We can just change this. And let's see here how it looks like. I think these CTA buttons can be removed. We do not need it. The title, we will most likely want to have it, and the image here we will also most likely want to have it, because we want to have the thumbnail of the actual image to be presented. So we can still keep the hard-coded image here. It's fine. We're going to substitute that in a later phase, I guess, when it makes more sense for us to connect the backend and so on. So before we stop with this, we'll just go back and look at the design now to see if we have missed something crucial, or if there's anything else we need to change. All right, so there's no obvious thing that sticks out. So we have the latest news. We can remove this portfolio here. We do not need that. And we can also have a margin top of 60. We do not need to have a margin bottom of 60 anymore. I think to have 40 would be more than enough. And I think maybe we want to have a padding on the top instead of the margin, because we want it to build within the scale. Okay, so continuing with this, we have 3 news, and we're going to have a button to explore more news. And since it's contained in this way, I would like to have the text left aligned. We do not want to have it centered anymore, so we can just go ahead and remove that real quick. And we do not need to have it in a white color. We want to have it in brown color now. But before, we are going to say border radius styles. We're going to add the border radius essentially to get these rounded corners here. It looks quite nice. And for the title, where we select to have a white color, we are going to change it now to have the brown color. All right, so immediately it starts to look much better. And yeah, as you can see here, we have the articles. So hoovering the articles, in the future we're going to add links so that when you hover it, you will be able to navigate to that page. Okay, so continuing with this, we're going to add links let's do it in a later phase when we have actual backend. We're going to make sure that the design and everything is looking top-notch. So we'll have the same here, a padding bottom of 60px, so that we have something that looks quite nice. So the container, I think we want to have a padding of 40px, because that's what we have had on other places. So padding around, and this means we can essentially remove 40 on the top and 40 on the bottom, so that we don't have too much space. All right, so this is immediately starting to look much better. We have the news and explore news in this way, so it follows the centered line that we have from other pages and other views as well. So continuing with this, there's a couple of things we still can do. We have this, I think this is quite enough for this page. We're going to add a partner section, since our customer had the partner section. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And in order for us to do that, let's go ahead and create a new component. So we'll create a new component called partners, or partner TSX. We can just copy it from here because, you know, by this stage I'm quite lazy. Partner. All right, so we'll go ahead and make sure we are exporting it from the barrel file as well. So we will export it, and it was called partner. So now we could go to the index page, to the home page. In this case, we could all add the partner section. I recommend dividing the content in this way and just sending the data from the parent. I think it's much more convenient. All right, so the partner section was just a copy of the hero section. That's why it looks like this. And here we can determine whether we want to have it light or dark. I think for our case it would be okay to continue with the dark one, because we have a light section, and it would be strange to start with a new section that would be in the same color before having the blue, of course. So now that we have the blue one, we are going to add the partner section. So we're going to essentially just copy the different partners that they had on the page. We're just for now, just imagine we're going to add all of these different logo types from the CMS, so don't worry about that. We will just inline them here for now. So in this case, we are going to say partners. We're going to have a similar way that we did here. So partners to outline that it's the partner section and so on. So we can just go ahead and just print the partners that we have for now. So we'll just print them for now, and we will change them in a later phase. All right, so we can just inline them in this way. We can start copying the next image that we have and just continue in this way. And how did that receive? All right, so I obviously copied something strange, so we need to, yeah. All right, so we'll copy this, and we will copy this as well. So once this is done, we can go back, and we should have 3 different logos. And we could also imagine that all of these logos should be able to, we should be able to add multiple logo types in this way. So we can just add a div, which is going to be the logo wrapper. So we'll call it classes, the logo wrapper. This one will just essentially set it to be a grid and so on. So we'll go ahead and say display flex, just a content space between, gap 30. We don't need justify between. This looks strange. So, and within we want to say the image is going to receive a max height of, say, 60 px. In this case, it will look much better. We can also say all of the images we want to have a filter. Let's see, because it doesn't fit independent on what color it will have and so on. We can do and say we want to have it a grayscale. Maybe not 100%, but we can set it to be at least 80%. So now that we have a grayscale logo types, I think maybe we need to have it even further. I think maybe 100% was best in this case, just to not to remove all of the different colors that might appear. There might be red, green, and so on that wouldn't be so trivial for our design. All right, so now we're going to change this text from here. We're going to start to remove it. We are going to try to have this title. So we could either create a component, but in this case, let's not do it because it's a simple thing to do. Actually, let's go ahead and create a component because I'm quite lazy, as you know. So we'll call this header section header tsx, and here we're going to just export. Let's paste that code, and we're going to just copy whatever we had in section, and we can go ahead and copy this code, place it here, and we are going to say this is the title, or the subtitle really, and this is going to be the title that we have, and we want to import the different components that we're going to have. Sorry, this is going to be imported from Mantine core. We have some issues here, so text and title is coming from there, and we can also go ahead and snatch the CSS that we had in our other place. So by doing that, we could essentially, let's see here, we will save whatever we had. We do not need to have the children anymore. All we need to have really is the subtitle and title. All right, so it's going to be 2 different props essentially. Okay, so once this is done, we'll just rename it so that they have a specific name, so section header in this case, and we're going to Also set the subtitle and title, and both of them are going to be mandatory, so just remove the question mark. In this case now we are only left with the CSS. So going to the work page, we can just snatch whatever we had for the subtitle and title, and of course the header as well. So just copying, removing and replacing in this way. So just import colors. So now what we can do is we can make sure that we actually export it from the barrel file as well. So we'll go with section header, and we're exporting it as a section header, and we can go to the work page. So now we have some issues here. Obviously we removed the styling, so we're going to import the actual section header here. So importing the section header, we can pass in the title. Yeah, say what was this? It was looking at the actual design. It was portfolio, and the latest work was the title, and the subtitle was portfolio, right? So you don't need to have the curly brackets if it's a string. All right, so now it's back here, right, with one line. Of course, reusability is king. So now we'll go back to the partner page. We're going to have a similar heading here. So now we don't even need to bother about the stylings here. We'll import it. Going back down here, you see it should have the same actual logic. All right, so I think what we can do now is, because it's super long space here and it's super long space there, and it's less space here, we need to have a negative margin on the news page to eat up that space. So what I would do in that case is I would, on the root, I would just say a margin. All right, so since we had, let's see, the section had a margin of 120/16, so now we wanna decrease it to 60 in this case. And was it padding? Yeah, it was padding, sorry. So let's go ahead and add padding instead. So having the padding here, as you can see, it's not too much space around it. It is a bit more. Let's continue with that. We can work with that. So continuing with the partners page that we have. So we have 3 different logo types here. It's just basic images. We're going to upload it to Sanity later, and we are going to fetch all of the images from there. All right, so this is we're going to change here from latest work to partners. And what do we need to have in the subtitle? That's a good question. So maybe we should have partners there, and then on the next one we want to have we will just think out what we might have there instead of just partners, because we cannot have partners and partners. Maybe we should have we can check what I had before, so they only had partners. We will figure that out with time. So the last thing we need to have before we can start making sure that the CSS and everything is good on the page is actually a footer. So we have the hero section, and we have the boxes that we have. We're also going to make it a bit more fun by adding like a big image here up here. We're going to improve the logo type and so on, and we're going to make sure that the buttons have a specific, as you can see here, this does not look good. So we're going to make sure that we override the Mantine buttons to make our own customized buttons. Okay, so continuing with this, we will just go ahead and create a footer. So in the shared components folder, we'll create a footer TSX. Just copy the header, we'll paste it here. So we'll change it to footer. It does not have any props right now. It will most likely have a lot of props because we want to probably insert a couple of things from Sanity. We haven't determined yet, but it could be an option. Depends on the customer's needs. So having this, now we have our partner section. Let's go ahead and add our footer, and keep in mind we're adding all of the general things to the app TSX file, so the footer would come here as well. So as you can see here, the footer is copied just straight out from the header. So what we can do now is we'll go ahead and add a footer. Can just clean up a bit here, and we want the footer to have a specific background color. We want the footer to have a color which is going to be, in this case, it's going to be colors dot accent. I think it was accent. Yeah, accent background, accent this. So going to this, yeah. So what we need to do now is we're going to add a grid. So in the grid with Mantine, I think their grids are quite awesome. So we can specify grid dot item. This is going to be the item that we have, and here we can say the different spawns we want it to spawn within. Alright, so the first section, let's go and just say this is our sitemap. We're going to provide a list, and within the list we'll have links, and one of the links is going to be about page, we have the contact page, we have the, yeah, and you could continue in this way. Alright, so let's continue in this way. Sorry, all of them should be wrapped within the li elements, of course. So let's see, we had about, we had services, we had pricing, we had blog, maybe we want to have something about cookies we're storing and so on, so we'll go ahead and say info and cookies, and also go ahead with the ampersand Unicode there. So in this case we have some sort of a menu, and as for the last item here, and you can check the responsivity. So as for the last one, I think maybe there are even too close to each other, these boxes, so maybe we should just increase from SM4, and this one let's also let's say it was 6 before, and let's go ahead and say we're going to shrink that to A4 as well, just for those purposes, and the last box obviously needs to be 4 as well. Okay, so that we have a 3 column in the footer. Alright, this does not look very good on the desktop, so yeah, what we could do is essentially say on small we want to have it on this, on medium we want to have it the way we had before, because that would look much better than it does look now. So you would be able to say 3 and 3. So in this case we can just, yeah. So here is where you could put maybe your categories of your blog. It could be really anything that you would want to outline to your customers. Maybe it would be something related to the services that you have. So we're going to go ahead and say design. Maybe we'll have backend development. And we'll go ahead and say front-end development and so on. And UX, maybe UX, UI design. Yeah. So I think this will be enough. We can make sure that the footer is looking much prettier. Also keep in mind, when we have this background, usually we want to have the a specific let's see, we usually want to have the specific background or sorry, the color for the images, which is essentially colors brown. So for all text you want to have the brown one, because it sits quite nice with this orange-ish palette in the background that we had before. So as you can see now, this one has like yeah, it does not look really good. It seems like it has a margin top and so on, which it might not have due to the line spacing that we have on it. Yeah. Alright, so let's continue. Now we have the footer, and before we have the footer we are going to want to have a last thing. So in this container, we'll create a container with a margin top. It's going to be, say, 60 px. In this one we're going to have a text which is going to be quite small. Let's say size small. Sorry, it's a string that is being, and here we can say copyright, copy, and here we can say, yeah, what year is it? It is 2023. Right, so doing something like this might be good and efficient. Maybe we do not want to have the bottom spacing in this way. I think it looks horrific. So as well, we can go ahead and say classes, copyright section. So this copyright section or container, really, we could have a border top, and then we also had the, if you remember, we added the colors, accent border color top. Sorry, we need to have it in this way, 1px solid, yeah. And here we could also say padding top, we want to have maybe 16px to pad. But in this screen we also want to remove we want to remove the spacing in the bottom, and it comes because we have it in the root. So we can say margin bottom, let's go ahead with 0. Alright, so instead of margin bottom, I just remember that we have the padding bottom, and now we have no space to the bottom. Of course, this does not look good, so we'll go ahead and just add it here. So we'll have PB, which is for padding bottom, and we can just add 60px. That was too much. We'll go with and set up with 40px in this case. All right, so I think this is looking quite nice. It's not too fancy, it's not too bad. This SMP is going to be replaced with a logo type that we haven't added yet. We're going to add that shortly. Now that we have this design, let's go ahead and start focusing on the design. Let's really start making sure that it starts looking really good, and we'll start with the hero section, because this hero section is the make or break, or it's essentially one of the core features and core design that you want to be looking good. So what we can do is we can just have an image here. We're going to, let's see, we're going to copy an image as an PNG, and we're going to save it. And keep in mind that in this case, we do not want the user to be able to insert the images. So we're going to insert it manually from here and not to have it from the CMS. So here in this case, we're going to say this is going to be the hero image.svg. We're adding the hero image. Sorry, it is going to be a PNG really. All right, so we will export this image from Figma in this case. It's the tool we're using, so we'll go ahead and click on it, and then you can export the item as a PNG. So we're going to do that. We can look at image optimization later. For now, we're not going to do that. We're going to, yeah. So let's delete this one and let's rename this one to PNG. All right, so now we have our hero image. Going to the let's clean up what we don't use. So going to the hero image, now we can essentially just utilize this image that we added. So in order to do that, we can first and foremost, we want to create some sort of a container, a grid. So starting with the grid here, let's import it from Mantine core, and then we can say grid.col. This is first column that we have, which is going to essentially contain the content, and then we have the second one, which is essentially going to wrap this image. So we're going to be able to say, all right, so select the images, the hero image, the PNG, and this is going to be the hero image. Since it's only for design purposes, we'll just go ahead and give it an empty we'll give it an empty alt. So here we can also say that this class name, classes, and we're going to say this is going to be the hero image, and we can go ahead and stop styling that. So we're going to say, all right, the hero image we have, it's going to have a max width of 100%. We want it to contain wherever it's being placed. So now we can say on the XS, we want both of these items to have the 12. So we want both of the sections to be taking all of the area, which is quite common. So, and we can also say on medium we want, or sorry, on small we want it to be 50-50. Right, so saying 50-50, this is what it's going to do, and this is how it's going to look like. So it does not really look good. So what we need to do, or what I would recommend doing in this case, is one of the following. Either we make this larger, or we add a more spacing here. I think adding more spacing there might make more sense, first and foremost. And so when I think it's also too bold. I think it's removing our attention from this text. So we're going to change it, and we're going to make sure that we are importing it from the text. And here, instead of having the subtitle that we had before, we do not need to have order. Just saving it, we can say size. We can say it's going to be large, and it's going to be as a string, of course. But we're also going to say, hey, this text, we want to have a weight which is going to be light. So we want it to be quite light. But we can also change the color of it to be more light gray, so that it's not sticking out too much from this container, because we really want to focus on turn your ideas into reality and the CTA. And this is something, if you want to read it pretty much. All right, so let's do this by adding a class name here. We're going to say classes dot hero sub text, and we can go ahead and copy this here, and we can give it a specific color. If you do not have the color in our colors, let's go ahead and add it. We can say light gray. So let it be like let's see, what can that be? It's going to be grayish, so maybe this color might be good enough for us. So let's go ahead and refactor this one as well to colors.white. Color, and here we're going to say colors.light gray, and let's see, maybe it's too, make it more gray maybe. Alright, I think that was too dark, so let's go ahead and say, yeah, this looks much better. So alright, this is not taking your first attention when you come to the screen. This will, I think also our H1s are too small, so I would recommend that we go to app.tsx file to make it even larger, so maybe 3.8 rem. Yeah, I think this is quite nice. And here we do not need to set the, yeah, I think it's quite nice when it wraps a bit, so it becomes much easier to read. All right, so now we can see that they're almost a similar height on these items that we have. I don't know why the contact us is this far down. Maybe it's because, yeah, we forgot to add it into the text section. So if we add it, it will appear in this way, and now we can see that, all right, it's starting to look good, but not good enough. So here we want to have on the margin top, in case of, instead of 20, we want to have 40. So this also indicates that if this image is larger than this and we do not want to make it bigger, what we can do is we can say, all right, we're going to shrink the size to 5 on the image, and we're going to increase the size on the text in this way. But we also want to have a gap, right? We want to have a specific gap on the, sorry, it's called a gutter. So we want to have a specific gutter on large screens. So gutter XS is going to be 0 because we're essentially going to align them next to each other. So this means on small we want to have 64px so that they don't go too close to each other. And when we hit the full screen, we want it to be 0 in this case. All right. So another thing we want to do is we want to say, when you come in on a mobile device, we want this image to appear above this instead of having it in this way. So in order to do this, we can utilize the order. So we'll go ahead and say order XS is going to be 2, and the order of this item in extra small is going to be 1, which means that when we hit the mobile breakpoint, it's going to, as you can see here, switch the sizes. I think it turns too fast, to be honest. Yeah, it's because I didn't set the order SM, so XS will take out all of the spaces otherwise, so we can just go ahead and set the SM as well. So here we can say order SM is going to equal 1. So on small, we want it to be on the flipped way. When we essentially shrink this box, yeah, as you can see here, it turns. All right, so in this way, you can see how powerful really the Mantine is. It's super easy, so it would be bootstrapped by actually giving you the opportunity to change everything you want without having to rewrite everything. So here we can say, all right, we can settle with this for now. So we have the image, we have the CTA. I think it's starting to look much better than it did before. We can just preview it in large screens. So it starts to look more like a website, but I think it still misses a couple of things, right? So maybe we're missing the heading here as well that we have down here. I think it would be quite nice to have another H1 looking like this, but instead of an H2 would have the H1 in the same similar way. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add that text, and since we could utilize the reusable components, but in this case, because we do not want to do it, because it would not make sense, because we want it to have left aligned, we want to have different sizes and so on. And we could create a component which is kind of smart enough to do it, but let's not do it because we are lazy, as I mentioned. So here we're going to add a star SVG. So we're going to just, for fanciness, we're going to add more elements here so that we can preview them on the screen. So we want to add it here to turns your ideas into reality. We could also add a light bulb because it's an idea that you have. So we could look for a light bulb that we could use. But let's start with the star for now. We are going to add it turns your ideas into reality. Here we're going to add an image. We're going to say this image source is going to be images, and it's going to be the star.svg. this way, and this is also just for visibility, like it's not for any accessibility thing, so we'll just leave it empty because it does not describe anything. The user does not need to know it's a store there. So we'll go ahead and say a class name, hero store. Alright, so on the hero store we want to do a couple of things. So we want to say this is going to be position absolute, and in order for us to use the absolute positioning, there's a couple of things we need to do. Position, right? So we can also say we want a z index to be -1 maybe, but that will throw it out of the actual content. So what we want to do is we want to say on the root we want to have a z index, sorry, position relative, and we also want to have the position relative here. So pos relative is what we can use here. So this would be relative, so that the image would automatically appear there. We can go ahead and say right 0. Alright, let's go ahead and say right 40 in this case, 60, 80, just to make sure that it looks good. So top, we want to have, maybe want to have -40 in this case, just to pull it up. That was too much. We'll settle with in this case. And the last thing we want to do is we want to make sure that it appears behind the text. At this case it appears above the text because it has a position relative, position absolute, and what we need to do is essentially wrap these items so that we can make sure that we have a greater z index. So class name, classes, hero, section, content. So hero content, this is the content, otherwise or just for styling. So we'll go ahead and add it here. So what we want to do is say position relative. Also want to say z index going to be 3 in this case, so just so that the store appears behind. Alright, so as I mentioned, we want to have the text above that turns your ideas into reality. We want to have it in this way. So we could go to the section header. We could just copy it for now. We could go back here and we want to say we want to add the text here. We're going to say text, class name, classes, and this is going to be the hero, subtitle or subtext. We already had that, right? Hero, subtitle. All right, we'll go to subtitle, and here we are a digital product studio, which we are not, by the way. Hero, subtitle, and here we're going to just paste whatever we had here. And if you just scroll up, you'll see we are a digital product studio, which we are not. We are a, we'll go with development. We'll stick with the dev studio. So empty 20 here, just add some, we want to add some margin top to be 20 pixels in this case, so that we have, and as you can see the store is not aligned like it was before. It has to do with the we adding the text really. So we can also say on 60 we could add media query. So this is going to be generalized, and I mentioned the button, we'll get into that shortly. And as you can see here, it starts to look much better than it did before. So if we just full screen it real quick and scroll down, you'll see that it looks better than it did before. It's not perfect by any means, so we can try to make it more perfect, starting from top to bottom. So in this case, we're going to start with the logo type here. So what we want to do is we're going to copy the logo type from here, and in the future we're going to make sure that it comes from Sanity, so from the backend. So instead of having it in this way, we are going to just say image source, which is just going to equal this. We'll give it an alt, logo type. Alright, so that's not looking too good, to be honest. So let's go ahead and we could utilize the next image here. We could say width 100, height 100, but it's not a squared. But so what we can do is say we can set it to be having a width of 120, 150. Also, since their previous logo type was gray, I would recommend that we would change it. if you're unsure on the dimensions of this image, you could go in here and say that it's a 3:1. So 150 is usually the what it should be. So all right, so looking at this, there's a couple of things we could improve. I think it's already starting to look much better than it did before. I think this logo type, we need to change it. It does not look very trivial. So let's go ahead and change it really. We want to add the white color to it. We want to make sure that it's completely white. Let's see here. I'm doing a couple of things in the background. I'll be right back when that image is white. Alright, so now we're back. We're going to add the background there. Let's shrink the screen once again so that we can put them side by side like this. Alright, it was still too big. Continue, and we will zoom out a bit to get it to another view. Alright, so we're going to change the image now. I just re-changed the color of it. I created a SVG. We can go ahead and add it here. So shared images, logo, the SVG, and here you can just go ahead and print the SVG that we had, and then we can here in the header once again just make sure that we are pointing it towards our created logic. So I think now we have a white logo type. We also want to have the same logo type in the footer. In this case, we might want to have the in brown color. So either we can create a new image that would be holding the brown color that we have, or we could just play around a bit with it. But I think for now, for ease of use, we are going to make sure that it has the brown color. So in order to do that, I will change the color in Figma. I will copy the SVG from Figma, and I will continue to add it here. So public, we'll go with logo brown, the SVG, we'll paste it here, and once again we'll head back to the footer, and we are going to change logo dash brown here. Alright, so now we have the brown logo type that we had before. I think we still have some strange height issues on this. We need to look and determine what the issue is, because it becomes 156 and so on. So yeah, it's because we're placing it within a title. It might be, yeah. So as you can see here now, it should be completely straight in the lines. We're also having our customer's new logo type and so on. So scrolling down here, we should have this section, and it should also be responsive. So if I would shrink the screen, you would see that it becomes responsive, which is quite nice. And we'll continue with the how can our agency help, and this is now the next thing we'll do. So going into that page, we're going to go to the index pages, and we're going to services, right? So this is our services page, and in order for us to change it here, the thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the boxes are aligned in 3. So here we had just a couple of different, here we can remove the width really. We do not need to have the width here if you're starting to use the grid thing, which we should have done from the beginning. This is just I just completely forgot about it, to be honest. So what we can do is we can add this within the article here, and we will be able to start utilizing the grids instead of having to have the CSS for that, because we should already have it. So next grid, yes, and we have this last grid here now, and we will just paste it real quick here. So now we should have it in the grids. It will completely destroy the sign, which is quite okay, or which is okay really. What we want to do now is we want to be able to still have it in the way it was before, by having 3. So we can say on XS we want to have 12, and on small we want to have it to be 4. So we could do the same thing for the other columns as well, and doing this we should have 3 of these items in this way. Also we want to make sure that the articles are having at least the same height, so we should be able to say 100% so that they are appearing on the same height. Otherwise it will look kind of strange in the design. We could also, if you want to, force the CTA to the bottom here if you want to. I think it would be much more trivial to do it, so let's go ahead and do it. So in order for do that, we need to go to the article and we need to select the P, and we want to say, hey, we're flexing and you can grow. So we can say display flex, right? And we're going to say flex direction column. So we'll swap it. So instead of placing them in this way, we're going to swap and place them in another way. And we can say our P element, my friend, you're going to have the opportunity to grow. And we're going to say flex shrink 0, and we can also say height 100%. Let's see if it actually targets this. I usually just inspect it real quick to see what goes on, and as we can see here, nothing is being applied. So let's go ahead and check why nothing is being applied to this actual div. And the reason to why it does not apply is now because we have doubled the CSS here. So let's go ahead and just move it down. And as you can see, this is not exactly what we were thinking of. Let's remove the height 100%. And now we can see, my friends, we are aligning them to each other. So this will be looking much more, it will be much easier on your eye to read and so on when they are aligned in this way. So now we should already have responsivity on them. So when we hit a certain point, it should just jump down like it does now. What we want to do is we want to say, we had some border radius things and we had the gutter on the grid. Let's go ahead and remove the gutter, set it to be 0. And yeah, as you can see here, all of these sections are receiving the wrong radius that we had. So what you can do is essentially we can just remove all of the radiuses that we had. Let's let it be in this way. I think this is kind of okay if we add back the gutter. So we'll go ahead and add a gutter of 16px instead, and now we can say all of you are going to have a certain border radius. All right, so we can remove that as well. And we have the border there, and then we'll set the border radius styles border radius. All right, so this now starts to look a bit better. I think 16px might be too small, so let's go ahead on and say on gutter SM 32, and then when we hit the XS, my friend, we want to hit down to 0. Let's see what happens, because if I still have 32, it will, yeah, maybe we'll have 32 all of the way instead. It did in fact look much better. So yeah, cool. So now that we have how our ranges can help, we have the design, we have a couple of USB boxes that we can click and so on. We have the latest work that we had. This needs to be, we need to make sure that this latest work is also interactive. I meant we need to make sure that this is also responsive. So going to the work that we have, what we want to do now is essentially we want to make sure that we are using grid hairs as well. So in order to do that, we can remove the grid wrapper, or the article wrapper in this case. Really, we do not need it anymore. It was, as I mentioned, a mistake that I did. I just forgot about the grid system in Mantine. So we'll continue with that. We need to move the key out to the parent. And just saving this, let's see what happens. I think there might be some issues because we're selecting nth child and so on, and in order for us to change this, we need to set a clause on this as well. So here we want to say the article wrapper, article grid, and here we can see what goes on. So image wrapper, do we have the image wrapper? Yes, we do still have that. We do not have the article wrapper anymore, so we have article grid instead, and we can say article grid, and then maybe we can also specify article in this way, and we can say doing this instead. So nth child this, and then we can apply some styling to the actual article that we had. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. We'll see what happens if we still have the end result we wanted. I think what we're missing is essentially just setting the default size for the articles. So something is a bit off. I'm guessing that the issue is because we can see that the sizes are being pre-filled and so on. I would assume that the gutter on the grid is what's ruining us. ruin it for us, and apparently it was not the gutter on the grid that did that. So let's see here. We can, yeah, as I mentioned, we do not need to have the size manually anymore. I'm totally tired in my head right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to achieve this with the grid system. So let's make the screen a bit bigger. We're going to use the grid system as I mentioned to do this. So we do not need to have a class anymore. We can say, hey, this is going to be on small 12 always, but on this on the extra small we're going to have 12. On the small we're going to say, hey, you are going to be of the size, if index mod, let's see, if index mod 0, then we want to have the size 12, otherwise we want to have the size 0. Sorry. So we want to select the second nth child, so we should do if index mod 2 equal to 0. If I have no rest value, we know we're on the second item, so we can also say then we want it to be 8 and 4. So in this case we can align them like this, but we really know already which items we want to have in this way. So we can say when index equals to 0 or index equals to 0, 1, 2, 3, then we want to have it in this way. So 1, sorry, it should be 2 in this case, so that we have the inverted behavior. Alright, so here we have the same issue we had before with the images. We need to force the height here. So in order for us to force the height here, we need to set the height of the article to be 100% in this case. So height equals to 100%, done. And this should now look like something like this. So when we resize the screen, make it smaller, it should all appear on their own row. Meanwhile, when we are on the large screen, it should appear in the way we did before, a bit more clear. Alright, so I think we need to increase the gutter because this is way too small. I think we should have a gutter of, let's say, gutter to be 32 maybe, to make it more convenient and to follow the other design that we have in our code. Alright, so continuing, I think this section is also good enough for us when it comes to responsivity. We'll continue, and what we will do now is we are going to add a new section. So the latest news here, we're going to use the grid section there as well if you're not already doing it. So we'll go to news page. Let's see here on the news, we are in fact not using that, so we can go ahead and remove a lot of CSS. Alright, so we'll say on call 1 have it 12, otherwise on small 1 have it 4. So we are essentially saying that when you hit the lowest breakpoint we have as set up, it's going to be behaving this way. So we're going to move the key here as well. So saving here, we should have it something like this, and now we have the size there. We can remove the wrapper, we do not need it. And keep in mind, we want to have this similar gutter on the places we're already using it, so 32 in this case, to follow the same design that we have. So also the images we have, let's go ahead and add some border radius so that it follows the other design that we have. So we have 4px around it. Alright, it starts looking much better already. And continuing, we are going to do the same with the partner section. So with partners, here I will not use any grid system. We do not know how big the images will be. Instead, I would just set the 40 here and would increase the gap to maybe even 40 here as well. And I would say overflow and auto. This means that when we have a lot of images, it will automatically add the scroll bar, which is not looking too nice right now, but imagine that we are going to add a scroll bar as well. So now that we have the partner section done, we are going to look into the footer, and the footer, as we can see, since we already have the column system from the beginning, it starts looks nice. So I think there in the footer we need to add the gutter as well, so that we have some spacing that would look much better than before. Alright, so let's go ahead and open it in a mobile manner so that it looks like we're in the mobile. The menu is obviously off, but I'm thinking of the content right now to see how it actually looks like. I think this looks quite nice. What do you guys think about that? And the footer as well. The question is whether we are getting ready to actually start looking into, what is this? Aha, I understand. I have two larger. Okay. I was thinking, why can't I really scroll down all the way, but it goes outside of the screen that we have. Okay, so continuing, we are going to make sure that we fix the header. So that this is the absolute last thing we have here before we start actually connecting it with Sanity. So we're going to create a regular mobile menu. So in order to do this, let's go ahead and add a class here for the menu list, the second one, which is essentially the one we can see here in the menu here. But starting now, we want to add another class as well. So this is going to be classes menu content. Okay, so we can go ahead and check the menu content. We can say on menu content, we are going to have a default which is going to be display flex, but when we hit a certain breakpoint, so in this case I think we're going to write theme breakpoints. I think it's theme functions down access. So this is how you use media queries. So in a matter of fact, it's supposed to be theme functions and large. You can either use larger than or less than. So in a matter of fact, it should be theme functions that either you could go with larger or smaller than. In this case, we want to go with smaller than small in this case. So here we can say on the menu context we want to have display none. So this would essentially mean that we can, when we hit a certain breakpoint, the menu should disappear. And as you can see here, it comes back, and when we minimize the screen, it should go away. And in a similar way, we need to make sure that when the menu is being hidden, we need to have an icon here. Maybe it would be the hamburger, or it could be the button. In this case, we could have a button here that would prompt or open the actual menu. So here we'd have some sort of a menu icon so that we can click on it. For now, we're going to go with an equal star. So continuing, we added the actual trigram here so that it looks like the burger menu. The ideal way would be to actually have the real icon here. So continuing, we're going to add an onClick clause. We're going to say toggle menus. Whenever we click on this button, we want to create a function that actually toggles the state. So in this case, we want to have a use state. So menu open, and here we would, instead of having React dot, we'll go ahead and go with use state instead. Immediately we'll import that from React. Also, we're going to, as I mentioned, toggle the menu. So const toggle menu, and this is essentially just going to call a function that toggles the menu. So in this case, in this way. Alright, so now we can listen to whether the menu is open or not, and we can do a couple of things here on this class. So we can also add a third row here saying that if the menu is open, we are going to add classes that menu open, otherwise we are going to add nothing. So in this case, we can just add undefined or none in this case. So also what we can do is we can do it like this, so that we have it visible in one line. We need to add the clause here as well. So here is the actual menu list which we are going to apply whenever we decide to open the list. So here we can say we want to have display block on the items, because when we click on the link we want the items to be shown and so on. So now we need to apply this actual logic here. So when we click on this button, it's going to set the menu open to true, and it's going essentially to add this clause here. So we can just preview to see what the list has, which clauses it has. As currently we can see that it's being overridden here. So what we can do is just make sure that we move it all the way to the bottom here. So whenever we click on it, you'll see that the clause is being toggled on and off. And since we have a couple of things here, we can also go ahead and just copy the logic here. So this will give it a specificity which will make it the one that will be used. And of course, since we're having a display block, it does not really look good. So what we need to have on the menu is to have some sort of a absolute positioning so that when we open it, it won't look horrible. You can also say left 0, top 100%. Let's see what goes on here. So obviously we need to set a let's see, the menu is being opened somewhere down here. We need to make sure that instead of top 0 we can go with and say 0 for now. And as you can see here, we are left with having the items here. In this case we have the menu, which is 82px in this case, so opening it, it should reappear below it. But we have some issues with the menu right now. It seems like we have some overflow hidden, which essentially makes the menu not visible at all. So toggling it, it should appear, and it's coming here. We need to have some sort of a Z index, and we also want to set a certain background. So we'll go ahead and set the Z index to 3 in this case. We'll set a background to be whatever we had in our colors. So in this case, not the theme brand, but rather the colors that we set. So colors that it's going to be the primary color. We could also put a twist on that and set it to be something else. In this case, we're setting it to be the primary so that it fits the background that we have. So something is not really coping with us. I'm guessing the color is not being set at all, as you can see, obviously. So we have a couple of things. So we can set width 100%. The question is to why maybe the Z index is in this case too low. So as you can see, when we put it to be a 4, it will appear above it, and you can also say we want the items to have a width of 100%. So doing this, you can see we're toggling the actual menu, and yeah, it's being fixed under the menu, and hovering here we can select them as we did before. Obviously it does not look perfect, so let's do a couple of things. Maybe we will just say whenever we open the menu, we want to have a specific shadow, so we'll go with theme shadows Excel. So we're utilizing the shadow that we have in Mantine in this case, and as you can see here, it looks like we have a shadow down here. So I'm also thinking, should we have the accent background color? Would that make more sense? Maybe it would not make more sense, so we'll keep the primary as for now. But what we want to do is we want to set the li items, so or really the A, we can set a border bottom. We can say we want to have border bottom, which is going to be the colors that we have, and we're going to set it to be the primary. And for now it will just look exactly like it does today, so we can go ahead and add 30 to give it a certain opacity, and we can just preview. Here's the border bottom. We can start picking a color that would be suiting our needs. So let's go to 100 instead. I'm thinking we should maybe have something brighter, so it becomes easier for us to distinguish. So let's go ahead and pick something that makes the lines pop out a bit, but not too much. So this is something we can add to our styles index file, and we can say primary border, and we can say this is going to be the color, and now we have a standardized color that we can reuse for all of the places that we have. So what we can do now is just change this to primary border, and we'll continue with it. Now we have the borders, as you can see, and obviously we have one at the bottom as well, but as this is not a link, we don't have any spacing. So what we want to do is we want to say, if you are a button on mobile devices, we want you to have a sort of a margin in this case. So let's go ahead with 8 in the beginning. That's too little. We'll go ahead with 16. We just want to align the button to the left here so that we have some sort of a design logic here. And as you can see, they're being displayed at the same time, which is something we definitely do not want. It's because we're opening it and closing it and so on mobile desktops. But anyway, we can continue. So as you can see here, now we have a mobile menu, and we probably want to have a border top here as well, similar to this one, so that we can distinguish what the menu is and what actually belongs to the menu. So set a border top here. So now we have contained all of these different items that we have, and we can go ahead and select whatever we want to do. So in this way you can create a mobile menu. It's quite basic. You utilize the a functionality which essentially says, if you have opened me, display it. If you haven't opened me on smaller screens, then just hide me. So you're applying a class which essentially you're reacting to in the design that you have. So now if we would open it as a mobile, we can see how it would look like. Just reloading the page for now. The menu is totally gone, or yeah, it had scrolled. So as you can imagine, we probably want the menu to follow when we scroll. So to do this, you can just say, let's go ahead and remove this ugly theme colors here. So in order to do this, you can say position. I want the position to be sticky, and I want the top to be set to 0. So whenever we scroll, it should appear on top of everything. And here we can say set index 5 just for now, and you'll see that it actually appears up on top of everything. So the color here is wrong. It should not be primary border, it should just be primary. And as you can see now, we have the sticky behavior that we wanted to achieve. All right. So there's also a couple of things that's quite annoying to me. Usually you want to align the content in the same way you're aligning the sites here. And as you can see here, we have the image is having an extra spacing. So the logo type in this case, so you can just give it a class name where we essentially are going to remove the logo link. So we're going to remove the spacing from the logo. In this case, it does not make sense for us to have it, so we're going to say we want to have a padding 0 on the logo type that we have. And just going back, we can see what happens. And as you can see on the top here, we're having the burger menu still here, which is quite strange. We want to make sure that it's being hidden right on larger screens, so we can give it a clause here. We can say, hey, clause name, clauses, burger icon or burger button. In this case, saving this, we can go back up here again. We can say border button, so we default display none, and when we hit these smaller breakpoints, we want it to be shown, so we display show, display book in this case. So yeah, and when we zoom in, they should not be appearing at the same time. And when you, yeah, so you can see this is the exact logic we wanted to have for the responsive menu. It's quite simple, as I mentioned. So if we now scroll down, we want the items to be aligning correctly, and as we can see, this burger button does not really look good at all because it doesn't have any padding that the other items have. So we can just go ahead and add some padding to it. Sorry, we're going to add a margin instead for that. So adding the margin, we can see that it's being aligned in the exact way we have. We want it to be, but this is also one thing we need to get rid of. We have too much on the work, we have too much on the Z index, so maybe you want to decrease that a bit to 3. So now we can see scrolling through the website, it still looks quite good. Scrolling from top to bottom, it works as expected, and we can open and close the menu. So what remains to be done? Let's go ahead and see on the desktop version, and sorry, the mobile version at first. As I mentioned, we want to change the default buttons. Maybe we don't want to have this large spacing on the corners when we are on mobile devices. Currently we have padding left 1 rem and padding right 1 rem. Maybe on mobile devices we want it to be less than that, but for now we can continue working with this. Alright, so I think the buttons is next in line for us to fix. I think the rest of the content is actually looking quite good for us. So the landing page is quite good. We also need to attach it to the actual backend and so on. That's something we'll do with Sanity in this case, which is our headless CMS. So let's go ahead and start changing the buttons. So in order for us to actually style the buttons and so on, we can head to the app.tsx file once again, and we can start adding things to our theme. So we can add a new section called components. Within components, we'll add the name of the component, and we can here specify all of the default props we want to have for the component. We can also go ahead and set styles. We can say for the root, we want to set a certain background color, and you see that all of the buttons will have a certain background color. So imagine now there's something called a styles API in Mantine. You can go in here and you can see what you can style here. You can style the icons, the root, left icon, center, the loader, and so on. So all of these elements here should be what you're actually styling. So for instance, icon, I would add it here, and I would add some CSS for it here. But we're not going to really touch the icons. We're only going to create something for the actual styles that we have. Sorry, for the actual button. So going back, we have a red button. We want to change this. We want it to be, as a default, we want it to be colors that accent color, so that it fulfills the design that we have. So when you hover it, obviously we do not want it to be yellow. Maybe you want it to have background accent background. So yeah, that was not really what we intended to get, and this was quite weird. So we wanted to have the border color instead. Maybe let's see how that would look like. Actually no, let's go ahead and call a new variable called accent hover. We'll just keep it for now the same color, and we can just inspect it a bit. We want it to be a bit darker when you hover on the button, so just set the hover state, and here we can say a background, set it to be red, and here we can just get the first color, and we can just increase the to something like this. I think this looks good enough. We can go in here and set the hover here, so whenever we hover on the item or the buttons, they should have this design. So yeah, and as you can see, all of the other buttons that we have will have the same behavior. Obviously now the text is a bit cluttered, so we need to make sure that the button has the color white. So as you can see here, now we only have one type of buttons, which is not very trivial. We will most likely want to have different types of buttons. So what we can do is we can use the theme here, and we can just make sure that we return something. So not from the root, but rather from the style. So we'll just move this up one line. So imagine that we're theming it in this way. Now that we have an object like this, we can just go ahead and say return, and we can return the styles we want it to have. Here we can just log out, console log theme, and we can access theme params. We can also say button props, so we have a type for this. So I think they're called Mantine button props. I think this is what we can use. No, actually no, I don't remember. Yeah, just button props, right? So we can just console log the button props, but can also see that the button props contains a couple of different things. Here we can say which variant is this button. So you can say is outlined equals to, so we can see if the button is outlined, we want to have the reversed behavior. So if it's outlined, we want the color, so the accent here to be transparent, and otherwise we want it to be transparent. So saving this, we should have a transparent bottom somewhere with a transparent background, given that we have set it to be outlined. Let me see, was it outline or outlined? It was only outline. So just searching a bit in the project to see if we added it for the work. So we can go to work, we can say where's our button. Here is where we can say the variant is outline here, so we should be able to continue styling. So obviously this transparent didn't really work. We're having some issues with it, so let's go ahead and just log the console log button props, and we can see what it actually gives us. And let's see here, we will just go ahead and open the console real quick. The object contains a couple of things. It does not really contain the variant, which is, so obviously it's one for each button, and I'm guessing that a couple of or really some of these items might really include the variant within this call, really. So just going through, let's actually go ahead and just console log the is outlined. We can say if we have any true, all of the values are false for some strange reason, so we need to look into that. So after reading about it, we could see that there's even a third option. So this has been changed since version 5, so we can essentially go back to the app.tsx file to add the third one, and here we can just extract a variant from here, so we do not need to check whether the button, because it's not involved within the button props anymore. So looking at this, we should have a button looking like this, and also for sections where we essentially have the outline button, we want to have the color to have the accent color as a default. So this is how we want the button to look like. Obviously, when we hover it, it should not be this color, it should most likely be white. So yeah, not the background, but rather the actual color. So color, if it's outlined, let's just save this and see if it does its magic. So when we hover it, it should have the white. If it's yeah, so as you can see here, it's kind of looking quite good with the outlined and not outlined. So now we should have this behavior working on different backgrounds. So alright, so now we have styled the actual button, but does this look good? We're going to revisit this soon. We're going to try to move all of these things, all of these lines away from the TSX file, because we don't really want to clutter it. But we'll leave it for now. We'll save here. Now we have the buttons we want to have. So we have the primary button, we have the secondary. Obviously for the header, we do not need to have a primary for this button, so we can just go ahead and say variant is going to be outlined, and it will automatically just change to the outlined button that we just changed the look of. Alright, so this is one way of actually creating a responsive website. So just scrolling through the website, you will see, and as I mentioned, we will most likely want to have this section coming in before on mobile devices. I don't know what happened, so we need to revisit and see what we broke. So order XS is going to be so the order XS is going to be 2, order small is going to be 1, so on this column, and this one should be the reversed one, and it is in fact here, but seems like when we go below XS, it goes back to default mode, so maybe we should have just order 2 here to see what would happen when we go on less screens, and as you can see, yeah, it starts to look quite good. So we needed to have the default size for that. So starting here, we need to scroll. I think the sections might be too large on desktop, mobile devices, so we can go ahead and go to our section here. We can say, hey, my friend, when you are on theme function smaller than, when you're on smaller than it sounds a bit fun, smaller than small, we want to change, so instead of 16px we have 8px, but we also want you to shrink the height of these sections to 60. So, and as we can tell here, we have 40 pixels on these items. I think it might be too much on mobile devices. Maybe we should only have 20. So we can go ahead and go to the services that we have, and we can do the same thing here. So we can also go ahead and say, so theme function smaller than small, we're going to say we're adding 20. We can just copy this logic because I know for a fact that we're going to have it in a couple of places. Just scrolling down, let's see what happens. I think this is also 40 pixels, so we can go to work. We can find where we have it. So just pasting it here, we're down to 20 again. In general, wherever we have 40, let's go ahead and try to reduce that to 20. So we can go ahead and see, do we have 40 somewhere else? Here maybe we have, I think this is good enough, and here we have also too much spacing. This should be reduced to 20 as well. So all right, so now we have a similar behavior where we shrink the padding on small devices in order for us to make it more responsive, looking a bit better than it did before. Maybe we want to remove these dividers. Just for now, let's keep them. I think they might be a bit ugly, but let's keep them. So as for the mobile, or for the footer menu, I think this is too large here when it comes to the actual padding here. So we need to go to the footer and make sure that we don't want to have any, yeah, we should have a padding bottom of 0 here really. So this must be overridden somewhere. As we can see, it's actually being overridden. So And this has to do that we added the media query, which essentially makes it have more specificity, which also overrides what we had before. So I think we're getting done with this landing page. I think the content that we have created here, we can just go ahead and enlarge the screen a bit so that we can see how it would look like on desktop devices. So scrolling, we're starting from top here. We have, let's see here, let's go ahead and do this. We can see more content. So we have the stickiness. I still think I'm having issues with this link here not being really where it should be. So you see we have this padding here. We most likely want it to have, it can still have a top and bottom, but we want it to be aligned to the left corner here. This looks much better. So we're going to try to achieve that. We could also see that this section here goes too wide in comparison to the other views that we have. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the code once again. I will shrink the screen once again, so like this, and we can just move it like this, and we can just enlarge it a bit. All right, so what we want to do now is as I mentioned, we have this padding. So if we go to the header here, we had some link. So on the menu link, we had no padding, but on desktop devices, it had in fact some padding, and as you can see, it jumps in a bit. So just inspect it to see what actually goes on. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sorry for zooming out a bit, but I'm trying to see it at the same time we have the double screen. So we can see here it's being overridden because it's a link. If you want to override it, you can always use the important tag, in this case to increase the specificity of the website, and now we can see that it actually goes all the way down to the left side of the content. Alright, so let's get started by actually connecting it with the CMS right now. So what we want to do is essentially open up the other project that we had. So the CMS project will go into schemas, and we will discuss a bit what schemas are and so on in Sanity. So for instance, we have a post, and if we go into the post here, we'll see that there are different fields which are being specified here. For instance, we have a type document, which essentially means that this is something that will be an equivalent of having an article, so more than one thing. And this is, for instance, a blog post. It could be an author and so on. So in this case, in our post, we only have a title, we have a slug, we have the author. So this is a reference to the author that we created. We have the main image, which in our case is going to be the thumbnail. You can specify the hotspot. It should be visible for you. It's also going to be able to select categories, so it's going to reference the category document in this case. It will also store a published at, and then we have at final a block content. So if you're not familiar to what a block content is, it's essentially a visivig, so what you see is what you get. If we just toggle the edit state, we can see what it actually does. So here in the body we can insert HTML, we can make bullet lists and so on. Yeah, so this is essentially what we're going to work on, and then we need to translate this within the actual other application that we have, so the front end in this case in the Next.JS app. Alright, so in order for us to start, let's go ahead and create a couple of posts. So let's create some dummy posts for us that we can utilize. So let's go to the website that we have. We had name of work, name of work. We can just add a couple of work one just for now, and this is going to be substituted by the actual person. So I will just go ahead and add myself as a author here. We do not need to have any bio, so I will publish the document so that it becomes available, and now I can select myself. Here we can add categories if there are any. At this point, let's go ahead and only add development. So let's publish this. So you publish the document, and then it will be available to receive it from the front end. So you can also set a publish date, and here we can start entering some content if you would like to have that. So here we can just add information about the article, the work. So we can add some lorem ipsum text here, and we can just iterate that a couple of times, and we can publish this document. So now we have one post essentially, and we could also, in this case, add an image. And we're going to add an image, so I'm going to just drag and drop that from the project that we have. So or essentially we can go to the work here and just snatch this image here and make sure that we install it, or say download it and then upload it. So we'll save this. Once this is saved, we will essentially just drag it in here, and it will start uploading the image. It will also use a CDN, so the images, you will be able to specify the height of the images, which in that case will also come with some better performance for images. All right, so we'll publish this item. Now we have one work that we can. Now we're going to essentially call it and fetch it from the Sanity CMS that we have. So in order for us to really connect it, we will first go and we'll create a folder called Sanity within the front-end project that we have, or really the next project. In this case, we're going to call it Sanity TSX, and here we're going to first need to install the Sanity client. So what we need to do here is we're going to open it, we're going to see the front end that we have, and we're going to call write npm install at sanity/client. So it's going to install the Sanity client and make it easier for us to actually utilize it. So once this is done, we can go ahead and first and foremost, we want to import the client that we have. After we have imported the client, there's a couple of things we can do. We can export it so that we, from different and various places, we can call this project and so on. So username, all right, so it seems that it has been deprecated, so we're going to essentially use the create client instead. And we can say sanity export const sanity from here, and then we're going to call it the create client and remove this one. Here we're going to have to specify our project. If you don't know it, we can find it in our config file. So the project ID can be snatched from here. Which dataset you have is dependent on how you did set it up. In fact, here we have different datasets you can preview. I think we only have production here, so it's not possible for us to really preview it. But if you would have more than one, you should be able to find them here in the top left menu. All right, so now when this is up and running, we can start actually by making some queries, and keep in mind that we are going to go to the index page, and we're going to use something called get static props. So there is either server-side rendering stuff, or SSG stands for static site generation. We're going to go with SSG in this case. We have no need to really have full hydration on the website, so we're going to get static props. And here we're going to essentially just return props, and here we're going to say, in this case it's our post, so we're going to say post, and here we're going to have a function that really calls the Sanity CLI to really fetch the posts and so on. So what we can do here is we'll generate a function like this, so we'll go with posts, and we're going to change it to this way instead. So instead of calling fetch post here, we can say sanity. It should point towards the Sanity client, and just to avoid this annoying import, we can go here and make sure we have a barrel file and that exports the Sanity star from Sanity, and that should export it. So going back to the index page, we should be able to remove that just to make it more convenient for us. So here we have the Sanity client, and here we can also say fetch, so Sanity fetch, and here we're going to have a post query, which we do not have right now. So what I would suggest is we go in here and we say we call create a file called queries tsx. Here we can say export const post query, and this is grok, so keep in mind that here we're going to select exactly what we want, and we can make sure that we have a couple of things, so we don't have an excerpt at this moment. So just to break it down a bit, we do not have the cover image. This just comes from the Google Copilot, so we can go to the post to see what we have. It's called main image in this case. So we need to do like this. So the main image, or we can really call it the thumbnail, does not really matter what we call them. So categories, with the forward arrow here, it will reference the category and fetch the title of the categories that we have connected to our work. We're going to fetch the title, the slug in this case, and the title slug, the author. We want the name of the author in our case. That's why we reference towards in this way. So forward arrow makes it possible for us to really fetch the author and then assigning the key that we want the name from the author. The same thing goes with categories, and keep in mind the categories is an array. That's why we do it in this way. All right, so this is going to return a string array, this is going to return the author, and this is going to return the thumbnail of the post. All right, so this is a way of actually calling it. So it's called Grok. It's Sanity's way of actually doing it. It's super easy, I would say. There's plenty of guides that can be used and so on. So I usually just put them within the await here. The reason to why I usually do it in this way is because in the future there might be more data we want to fetch, and this will simplify for you, so that you wouldn't have to rewrite the code a lot when it comes to this. So all right, so this means that when we do it in this way, it will be possible for us to receive the data on the home page now, and just keep in mind that whatever we return from here within the props will be coming as a props here in the post in the home. So we can call home props. We can say it's going to take the post. In this case, we do not have any types for the post. We are going to create a type, but let's just do this for our own sake so that it simplifies our lives. So if you go back to the front end that we have, you should see that it actually calls the data. So and now we can in fact send the posts into the work that we have. So we can say, hey, here's our post. We go to the work. Maybe we should even call it work instead of post. But in this case, it's the blog that we are essentially referring to. So the news, in this case, we need to create a custom one for work. The work is quite similar to the news, actually. And the services is quite standalone, but I would say the work and the blog posts are quite similar. Maybe we could have a category that would filter them out or so on. We'll get there shortly. So to continue, we'll pass the post into the news page, and also we need to make sure that we receive them. So with the news page, let's just type the post to be any in this case. So instead of having the array here, we can just remove the array completely, and we can refactor and use our posts. We can call it post item. So here we can have, since we're passing the title now, we can post item title in this case. So if we would go to the news here, you should see that it actually fetches the data, and we're receiving it here, and we're looping through the work one here. So now let's also make sure we have the image. It won't be a big difference because, yeah, as you might know, we're using the same thumbnail or the same image in this case. You can also go ahead and add a alt for this post. So saving this, it should be looking the same. It's still the same work that we have and so on, but it's actually coming from the backend now. So now if we would go back to here and create a new post, let's call it work 2. We generate a slug. We'll create the same user that we have. We're going to go we're going to upload the same image that we downloaded from the other web page. So let's go ahead and just upload one of the images that we had. So let's just upload one of my images that I have on my own. So just for this simple case, we were going to just to simulate how it would look like. Obviously the images needs to have the same dimension. This is not something that comes out of box. So this is something we need to keep in mind of when we create the images, unless we want to hard code the sizes and so on. So this is probably going to look kind of weird because they have different sizes, and also keep in mind that it might take a couple of seconds. So as you can see here, the images kind of look different because we have two different sizes. So let's go ahead and go to work 1 here. We can, instead of having this image here, we can clear field, and we can upload another of my own images that I have from my blog, so devbicep.com. So if we go back here and reload the page, now we should have two similar images. laying next to each other, and it should be looking a lot more better than what it does today. So it might take a couple of seconds for it to really publish and become live. So just bear with me. It will shortly be here and up and running. So just to confirm that it has been updated, we can reload here. Usually it updates on spot when you do it, but I'm guessing since there might be some delays that we have or some cache, that might be the issue. So we'll give it a, now we have work 1, work 2, and we could also go ahead and add work 3 just for having the design up and running. This is obviously something that our customer is going to replace with their own images and so on. So keep in mind that this is only for simulating the behavior that the customer is going to have. So I will have my last image added to it. So we'll also go ahead and add the category that we have. So we will also go ahead and say lorem ipsum, and we're just going to essentially just publish what we had. So once this is done, we can reload, and now we should have 3 news, which is enough for us. We do not need to add more news because we're going to have the explore more news button. So allowing it a couple of seconds, we will have that content up and running. Alright, so when we have that content up and running, we have the news section which is already connected. So let's go ahead and connect first and foremost the services, then the latest work. So in order to have the services, since we don't have any created schema for it or a document, we can go ahead and add one so that we have gone through that. So the services, we'll go ahead and add, sorry, it's not going to be TSX, it's just going to be TS. And let's be lazy, let's just copy whatever we had on the post, because they're going to be quite similar. And here we can remove the author. We do not need to have any author, so let's go ahead and remove the author. It's a service, so we really don't need a category either. We could have an image, maybe it would be some icon or something. We could have the block content. In this case, the block content would be just the content of it. But we also want to have a short text. Remember, as I mentioned, we want to have 2 lines here, and then we would have a learn more, which is essentially going to print all of the data, or essentially print all of the content. So let's go ahead and create, let's copy the title here. Let's go ahead and add a new, here we can say we want to have let's call it ingress. So ingress is going to be the short text that we're going to use. And here we're going to say, I think we can specify rows. We can say we want it to be 3 rows. Maybe that was a mistake from me. Maybe we need to have text area for it to work. So in order for us to use the rows, we need to have text there, so we can specify how many rows that are going to be visible, for instance, within a text area. All right, so after reading on the documentation, I found that out. So let's go ahead and add that real quick. So now we have the services. We do not have any author anymore, so we can just remove the subtitle from here. You could have custom title and subtitle. Let's say for us it's not really needed. I think that's overkill in many cases. So what we're going to do now is essentially we're going to register this so that it appears as a document. So in order for us to do that, we need to have really need to export it here. So let's make sure that we really called it services and not still have the post name for it. So here is the name, it's going to be services, and here it's going to be services as well. All right, so once this is done, we can essentially just import it within the index file here, and it should appear as a document. And as you can see, it's really quick. So adding the services here, going back to the Sanity client, it will reload the page, and now we should be able to create this document type. So going back to content, now we should have services. So now we can start adding the services that we want. So let's go ahead and snatch the titles we had. So we had the sign, we can generate a slug, which is going to be the URL for us, and then we can just copy paste the ingress, and here it's going to be like more text that we have. So maybe it will be the ingress and maybe something else. It could be images and so on. More of a descriptive text as well. So we don't need an image right now. That's good enough for us. So we'll publish this, and we'll go ahead and jump to the next one. So once this is published, we'll create a new document of type services, and we're going to snatch the development, and let's go ahead and copy the text as well. So we can generate a slug as well, and we can, we don't really need a body content here right now. This is going to be filled in by the customer themselves. So let's go ahead and create the third one. We'll go ahead and create the last one. So just copying and pasting the ingress here. We can add some content here with some dots so that we can look at how it would look like later. So once this is done, we should have three services really, which we then can call from here as well. All right, so and now we can go back to the index page. We should now be able to, you should be able to, here we should be able to essentially make a call again that would fetch it. And keep in mind that every one of these would require one call, so you can combine these if you would like to. There are ways to do it. So usually what I would do is I would create something called home page query, and the home page query in that case would essentially just call the, so this would be the posts, sorry, it would be the posts, and the post would essentially just call from whatever we had in the post query. We can remove these ones, and then we would have services, and this would call from the, now we don't have the services right now, but we're going to create the services query right now. So export const services query, this is going to call from the service. It's going to call the title, slug, thumbnail if we would have any. We don't have any right now, so that's fine. We want to have the ingress, and I think this would be enough. So now we should be able to fetch both of them in a single query, right? So we can just substitute this with the home query, and keep in mind that the response of this will be the object that we have. So home, let's call it home query, and here we can spread in the home query. It should mean that we would be able to receive the post and the services, given that the call would be correct. So here we should be able to say services, and we can just pass it in like we have done before, and we can just log it here to essentially see whether it is being passed or not. So we can just print it like this. Obviously the page should have crashed if it couldn't fetch the data or if any error has occurred, but as we can see here, it's now receiving the error that I mentioned before, so something is wrongfully set up. So I think I've seen the problem. We need to have the curly brackets around the query that we have here. So once this is done, now we should be starting to receive some data. We're not receiving anything from the services, so we need to look into what the issue about the services might be. And to do this, we could go with services TS to see, did we really define it as service? No, we did not. It's called services. So the type is going to be services, which makes total sense. So now that we are essentially receiving the two rows of data, we can start sending that down to the, yeah. And to be honest, we don't need to have the IDs, so we can remove that immediately. I think it's redundant in this case. I think this is enough. And as you can see here, the slug comes in this way. If you want to make the slug a bit better, we could say, all right, the slug is going to be the current in this way, and we can just copy it and paste it for the post. So now the URL should just come as one single line, I thought anyway. We can just change it to URL to see if that would make any difference. It would not make any difference, and sorry, it should be dot syntax and not the forward arrow, because it's not a reference in this case. And now we should have the slug here, so this might make it much easier for us to start working with. All right, so we have this stuff. Now let's go ahead and essentially replace them here. So if you go back to the index page that we have, sorry, not this page, so index pages here, once again, we're passing in the services, we're removing the console log. We can just make sure that we're passing the services to the services here, to the services component. And once this is done, let's go ahead and say services. As for now, we're not going to add any types because it's time consuming for us to do it. You should obviously do it, but as I mentioned, I'm quite lazy right now, and this is we're going to do it before we launch it to the customer. So just for visibility purposes, we're not going to do it. So in order for us to speed up the video, and keep in mind we're doing this totally for free for our customer, because our customer has been one of our friends that has been working with us a lot lately. So service dot title, and we have some issues. Maybe we need to have the key syntax here. So key, that would be service.title. We're going to have a unique title, and as you can see here, we have development and design, but the last one is still lacking. So let's see what happened there. Maybe we forgot to actually print the data. or publish it. So yeah, as you can see, it was stuck on actually publishing. So sometimes you just need to reload the page and republish it. So that would be enough. So now we have the slug here, right? We do not need to have this string, so we can just replace it to make sure that we are sending the user to the correct page. And here we're just going to change, and instead we're going to add service.slug. All right. So going back, we should have 3 links now, and all of them should have, as you can see on the bottom left, as you can see, sorry, let's scroll up a bit. As you can see, bottom left of the screen, let's do like this. I'm sorry. So bottom left of the screen, you should be able to see, which is not really previewable. I can see now in the video, but here we can see that for a fact that the links are going to the correct page we want them to go to. So let's reload the page up. Once again, we'll have development, design, and education, which is totally fine for us. So once this is done, we can start continuing with the work. The work is quite easy. We'll do the exact same way we did before. So we'll go to the CMS, we'll call it work. I think it's easier for us to distinguish between the post and the work, even though they might contain similar data. So it will also be easier for the customer to work with this. So it will be title, slug, author, blah, blah, blah. I think this is quite enough. We don't need to change anything really. So just keep in mind, once you have added you need to also add it here. So we'll go ahead and add work. So adding work here will import it. Once that is done, we should be able to go to Sanity, and here you should be able to add some work. So we should have work now. We can go ahead and add a couple of work that we have. So yeah, name of work, and the development here is going to be the category that we have. So we can link the categories to really anything we would want to. So we have development here, and we're going to call it name of work 1, name of work 1. You can generate here. You can select the author. We can select image 1. So let's go ahead and as we did before, we're just going to take images I have from my blog really, and we can go ahead and just, yeah, you can change the dates and so on. But let's say some text here, just for adding a couple of ones. We need to add 4 in fact, so let's go ahead and add 4 so that we can simulate the design. We also need to make sure that we don't fetch more than 4, so we'll get to that shortly. Once that is done, we're going to preview how it looks like. So we have 1 work. We're going to create work 2. Let's go ahead and just do this real quick so we don't spend too much time actually doing the job that will be done by the customer. So we'll continue second work. Let's go ahead and do the third one. We're doing this just, as I mentioned, just to simulate how it would look like. It does not really matter right now what content is. The content is going to be changed. So now we have published 3 of them. Let's go ahead and publish the 4th one. Obviously, we could set a default published ad so that whenever you publish, it will be set to the current date that we have. Also not something that's really crucial right now for iteration 1 of the design. So once this is done, we have now for work that we can use, and as you can see, I've been working a lot with Angular, so I have a lot of Angular videos that you can watch on my YouTube channel. So let's go ahead and also publish here. All right, so now we should have 4 services that can, 4 work that we can use. So we're done with the news. We're not done with partners yet, but we are done with here as well. So I can see now that we have 3 items. The work still remains to be done. So what we need to go do is essentially, let's go to the query section that we have, and now let's see here. Let's go ahead and go to queries. And we can do the exact same thing that we have done for the other ones. I would just recommend copy whatever you have for the posts, and here we can just say work. And the reason to why I don't have a function which essentially generates this for one or the other is because in the future we might change it, and it might be more trivial to have it in this way. So we're going to say work is going to essentially just be whatever we are passing in from this query. And now we can go to the index page once again, and we should be able to, it's already being passed in. So we can just go ahead and add work. And as you can see, guys, the way and the speed of actually doing this is super fast. We can get up and running within a matter of hours, really, instead of having a couple of weeks to deliver everything. So now we're passing in the work. So for the work, we're going to do a couple of things. Of course, we're going to add the any type here. Sorry for doing this. This is not the best practices. So please, guys, type your objects. We are going to do that, but not right now. All right. So once this is done, we're going to be able to loop through the work that we have. We don't need to have the array anymore, and this is going to be work. Sorry, we cannot have it work and work, but let's go ahead and substitute the image here so that we have our image that we want to have. So this is going to be work, the item.thumbnail, and then we want to set the alt text to be item.title, so that we have some SEO things and accessibility things that we have. So this was development. This is going to be the categories that we loop through, which is not going to be a button really. It's just going to be a badge that they can see. So here we should be able to say that we're going to loop through our so item dot categories map. You can say category. Also, we need to have the cat index, and then we can just add the button area in case we have more than one. We can say key is going to be cat index in this case. So and we're all, as you can see here, it does not look good with the images that we have, so we need to find a better solution of scaling so that the images won't be stretched in this way, because to be honest, this is not going to be a good user experience. The customers will not appreciate this either, so we can find a better solution really in shortly. So we'll also print the cat. Let's see what the issues are here. Cat index has an implicit type. All right, this is going to be number. Sorry, as the category is going to have any because we're too lazy to really type it for now. Really, it's going to be a string. This is the only thing we know for a fact. All right, so you can see development, work 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're being printed in a different order, and we'll get to the actual sorting shortly. All right, to continue, we're just going to jump into the queries. Once again, we're going to limit a couple of things. So for the services, we'll have only designed so that we can have 3 sections. To do this, you can write 0 to 2. And for the work, we're only going to have 3, so we can go with 0 to 3. And as we can see here, it still has 3, so this will fetch the 3 items of it. So, and for the posts, we're going to do the same thing. We're only going to fetch 3. Sorry, actually for work, we want to have 4 items. So we'll go ahead and do 0 to 4. And if we do 0 to 1, yeah, 1, 2, so it should be 0 to 3, it will fetch this one. The actual post that we have, it only has 3, so we're going to with 0 to 2. Alright, so 3, 4, 3. Alright, so once this is done, we have actually limited. This is how you limit in the database that we have, and so on. So in order for us to, we want to order them based on the published date. So what you need to do is you need to essentially say, all right, here we're going to pipe, and we're going to say, I think that the name of the post yes was published at, right? So yeah, published at. So we need to change this to published at ascending. So we're defining it to be in the ascending order. So once saving, you should be able to see this in the ascending order now, and you should be able to, as a user, you should be able to change based on published date. Usually we should have the descending order here. Maybe this means because we want to have the latest coming first and so on. So as we can see here, we can just go ahead and change a couple of dates to ensure that it works. So for the work that we have, we're going to go back to the work. So for the 4th one, which obviously, let's make the screen a bit bigger so that becomes much more readable for us. For the work, we're going to say, hey, we're going to set the 4th one to the current time that we have. The 3rd one, we're going to set it to yesterday. So we're going just to simulate what would happen if we're having a certain order. So the work 2 is going to be set to the day before yesterday, and so on. So also we can rename the work here so that it has the same pattern, because we're essentially going to just change that. All right, so now that we have published all of these articles in a certain order, they should also appear here in the similar order that they're being published. So 4, 3, 2, 1. So in fact, since we're doing it in a descending order based on date, this is exactly how we would want it to be, and this is exactly what the customer is going to want as well. So here the customer, instead of playing around with orders, they could play around with the dates and so on if they wanted, for instance, these USB boxes to be substituted. Maybe it's not the best user experience, but it's a quick thing to do and not too expensive to implement. All right, so once this is done, let's go ahead and flip the screen back again so that we have 50-50. And once it's 50-50, let's go ahead and see what remains to be done. So as I mentioned, we're not going to really fetch the data from the CMS when it comes to the menu. The menu, we're planning to have it hard-coded like this. If you want to call it hard-coded, I think this is enough for us right now. If the customer requests us to do a more another thing for them where they can essentially create their own menu, we'll do that. It's all dependent on what the customer needs. All right, so we will still remain to implement the partner section and this hero banner where they can upload the images and text and call to action things here. So let's go ahead and start with the partners because that's a simple one. So we'll go to the CMS once again. We can navigate in the tree. Let's call it partners TS. Let's also go ahead and just copy something from the services. So really the partners needs, the partners really need two things, nothing more. I would say a title and a description, or the image. So title and image, we don't need anything else really. So once this is done, we just need to rename it to partners, and we can go ahead and say partners. So once this is done, just jump to the index page and make sure we import it here. So if we import it, we save. Now it should already appear within Sanity. This is how fast it is. I'm telling you, this is magical. So we can now go ahead and click on partners, and we can start adding partners that we want to have. So we could go back to the page here. We can just save the images that we have, and we can start essentially uploading them. So let's go ahead and say this is the partners of our customer. So let's go ahead and save them real quick. We can, in fact, so this is the first one. We can go ahead and create a new one. And this is going to be, yeah, all right. So uploading them, the last one as well. The reason to why we're uploading them right now in this way is because we want to have them in our CMS so that when the user delete them, it won't really come from the it won't come from let's see, from their own web page, because if they remove the image, it will destroy the design that we have. All right, so let's just upload the last images that we have like this and publish it. So now we should have the partners as well. Let's go to queries once again. So we still have partners left here that we want to fetch, and we don't really have a limit on partners. We can have the order still here. So we'll go with partners query, and as partners, this needs to match whatever you have in the name, right? So we did not have any Slack, we did not have any author, we did not have any category, so it's only title and thumbnail in this case. So just go back to the index page. As I mentioned, it's going to be automatically, so kind of rewrite coming here. So we should have partners, and once again, sorry for having the any type. We do not want to have that. That's not a very trivial thing. We are going to change that, but right now we're focusing on getting the stuff in place. All right, so we have the partners. Here we can say the partners are going to be of type any, and we are going to pass in the partners. So once we have the partners here, we can go ahead and create a loop. So the loop is going to just be finding the partner that we have with some index. We'll have some image up here, and we are going to remove all of this. Now here we can say the partner.thumbnail. Alt text is going to be the partner.title, so that we have some some logic to it. So now we also need to add the key, which is going to be the index. So after saving this, let's see what happens to the web page. So we can see we have a couple of things here. Obviously this does not look good. It should not be these images that come from work, so we have done something wrong. Going back to queries, we can see what did we mess up here. So we're fetching the partners query down here, so just substitute it real quick and it should change it and insert the images that we have. So what we can do, if we go to the partner section, we don't really set the images to be a certain height. We know for a fact it's going to be a certain height here, so we can utilize the CDN. We have a max height of 40. We can say height is going to be 40. This is going to utilize the Sanity CMS, and it's going to scale the image to have a height of 40 pixels. All right, so that's how you can do it here. Now we have this section. This is quite different from everything else. This is not going to be a document. This is going to be that standardized for this page. So we're going to create that logic next. All right, so continuing with this, just to keep you up to date, I added a couple of more images. We added Google and Facebook here just to fill out the spaces. This is going to be changed with real customers in the future. Alright, so once this is done, as I mentioned, we need to fix the top section banner here. Once this is fixed, we can probably go ahead and say that we're pretty much clear with the website. There's not too much things to do. Alright, so let's just move this around a bit so that we can get started with it. Alright, so we will do this. We are going to enlarge the website a bit. So, alright, so now we want to insert all of the data here within the hero section. So what we can do is we're going to create in the Sanity, we're going to create something called a page. So let's go ahead and create the page. So we'll create closer, we'll call something called page DS, and within the page we are going to add we can add custom stuff that we want to have and so on. And in this case we are going to add a let's just copy whatever we had from work. In this case we'll go to page. For this we don't need to have any categories, we don't need to have any author right now. So title, this is going to be the page, as I mentioned. Page, we're going to have the title, and the slug is going to be there as well for some cases where we need it. Then we have the main image, which is going to be the thumbnail. In some cases we want to have it, but I think we can just skip that for now. So only title, slug, published at, and the block content, which is HTML that we can insert. Alright, so let's continue. We can remove the author. We don't have any author anymore, so let's go ahead and just remove that real quick. We go back to Sanity. We should have a page. We of course need to import it. So let's go to the CMS here and to the index page and import it. So page, we import a page like this, and now we should have a couple of pages that we can use. So going back to content, we have the page here. We can add a page. Let's call it home page, and then we can generate a slug, which we don't need in this case. It's going to be the first screen that we are on, and here we can essentially add some content if we wanted to, but this is not really going to help us with the call to action button that we have on our page. So we can add a custom object in this case. So let's go ahead and create a new schema. It's going to be the object, it's going to be the hero object in this case, so hero TS, and we can just, as before, just copy whatever we had to make it easier for us, and we're going to rename it to hero with a big H, and here we're going to call it object. So an object can be a part of a document, right? This is what we want to achieve. So just looking at the design that we have the subtitle. So we have the title, and then we don't need to have any slug in this case. We could also have the subtitle. So let's go ahead and create subtitle. Subtitle in this way, and we could also, in our case, we want to have some text, custom text. This is going to be the paragraph, so paragraph, and we can just have the same name here. And then we want to have the CTA, so call to action text. So we can go ahead and call that the just CTA text, so call to action text. All right, so now that we have this, lastly, we want to have the image, right? So that's the last thing we want to have. So we can just rename, or we could have the main image. Really does not matter. We can remove all of the other stuff. They are not interesting to us anymore. So we can just go ahead and remove this, right? So we can say that after we import this, we can create a within the pages, we can go ahead and add it as a object there. So we'll go to the page. Within the page, we can define a new field. Let's also put it all the way down, because this is only going to appear for a couple of large pages that we have, similar to the home page in this case. So here we can specify type hero. So we're going to call this the hero, a hero, and here we're going to call hero section. All right, so after we save this, we should be able to go back to the Sanity, and we should be able to, on the home page here, when we edit it, we should have the hero section here. So the title, subtitle, and we have all of the items that we want. So this is the subtitle, and then we have our actual title, like this, and then we have our paragraph, and then we have our CTA, in this case, contact us, and then we have our hero image that we want. So let's save this just for simplicity reasons, and go ahead and upload it and into the Sanity CMS, so that everything comes from there. All right, so now we want to publish it. So we have the home page. We can also just call this home. The reason to do this, we can also make sure the slug is home. So if we go to the index pages now, we should be able to extend this home query. We can say home, which is going to be the page that we have. So we can call page home, home page details query, something similar like this. We can maybe rename it, because I just figured that it was not a really trivial name. So we'll just go ahead and make sure we have a couple of things. So we have thumbnail, we don't have an ingress, but let's go ahead and close it. So we have the title, we have the subtitle, we have the thumbnail, we have the CTA text, we have the, what else do we have? So title, subtitle, we have the paragraph as well, paragraph. I think this is all we need right now. So now going back to the home page, as mentioned, we are sending it from here. This is going to be whatever we had here. So home, in this case, we're going to pass the home to the hero. We should maybe just call it hero mix, yeah, home, and we're going to say the home, and home dot, in this case, I think we named it, in fact, we named it hero section in this way, so we can just say we're going to pass in the hero here, like this. So we could go here, we could say hero. I think I missed a step in the last page, so we'll go back real quick just to make sure we have the home page here. So now that we have passed it here, we could essentially add the content here. So the star, we can leave it for now. We don't need to change it. We could check with the customer whether they always want to have it or not. This is something we can discuss with them. Here we're going to say we're going to print the hero.subtitle, and so we're already assuming that the query works and so on. The title here, we're printing it. This is the paragraph, so paragraph, and then we have the CTA text. So we're also going to name them in the same way they're being named in the other place. And lastly, we have our hero image. So in this case here, I think it was hero.thumbnail. So after saving this, let's see, make or break, if project crashes and so on. Obviously it does crash for some reason now. We need to backtrack a bit to see what actually happens. So do we really get the home page, or is something really being totally crazy on us? Let's see the query first and foremost. Before we do anything stupid, just go back to the home query. We can see real quick. So there's no type called home page, so we have the type page, and we can also say how we want the slug current to be home, whatever we set it to be on that page. And since this is going to return an array, we can say give us the first item that you really find. And if you want to try this out, I forgot to mention this. If you want to try this out before you utilize it in the HTML, like I'm doing, there's something in Sanity called Vision. So you could essentially go to the Vision here, and you can just print it here and call fetch. And here you would see we are in fact fetching some data. The data does not really look like what we wanted it to look like, so that we can now see that something is wrong. We have the title, which is correct. All of the other stuff is not correct. So going back to the desk, we can go ahead and go to the page to see have we forgotten to publish it. Obviously we haven't forgotten to publish it. And what is the issue then? I think we're missing to pass in the hero section. So we're not passing in all of these items. Sorry, I missed a bit of things. We should only pass in the title and hero section in this case. And the hero section is going to contain all of these elements that we have here. So if we now try to paste this content within Vision, we should be able to see what it would return. And as you can see here, we need to scale away a couple of things from the hero. So the thumbnail, we want it to be appearing in a string. We want it paragraph to appear, text, subtitle, and we also want the title to appear. So if you just copy this once again to see what would happen here, we should have, all right, so we have some issue here with the hero. Let's see, what is that issue? Do we need to have the arrow in this way? Let's try this out. Expected following. All right, so oh yeah, I can see here we have this redundant item there. I don't think we need to have the arrow really, because it should be included already. As you can see here, within the hero we have all of these items here already. So now the content should work after reloading the page, and now all of this should now come from Sanity, given that we have set up everything correct. Alright, so now we have one full page coming from there. I saw a couple of things that we should improve. So all of the services here should most likely come from the services that we have already. So if we would go to the index page that we have, we could essentially, for the footer, we don't have it here, but whatever we're passing through the static props will be available on app.tsx within the page props. And here we could in fact pass that down to the footer. But there's an issue here, and the real issue in this case is that we will not always know the services, so we would have to create a custom thing from there. But stopping here, I think this is enough for this video. We're not going to continue to add stuff. I think this has proven the simplicity of actually utilizing Next.JS alongside Sanity CMS in order to create a basic website that could replace the WordPress websites that are out there in the real world. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to know how we deploy this to an environment, I will create a separate video about that. Thank you for watching. All of the best. Bye.